Zhang Shi. Upon seeing Zhang Xian, the inceptive sage of the Seer Guild quickly greeted him with a clasped fist. Is Elder Feng still doing well? Zhang Xian replied the greeting. Back then, while he was in the Shrine of Seers, he had unwittingly destroyed the other party's treasure and tore down the entire place. In the end, he even caused the other party to be struck by lightning too, and that had left him feeling deeply guilt-ridden. He's in the midst of a seclusion at the moment, the inceptive sage of the Seer Guild replied. He seems to be a little down at the moment for some reason. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian scratched his head awkwardly. He could still remember the imposing air that Elder Feng carried with him when they had first met, and he couldn't help but feel that he was the cause of the other party's slump. I know that Elder Feng intends to take you in as his direct disciple, but still, as one of the guardians of the Tower of Master Teachers, I can't be going easy on you. This is to uphold the integrity and sanctity of the trial, the inceptive sage said. Of course I understand, Zhang Xian replied with a polite smile. Of the supporting occupations he hadn't reached a proficiency of 8-star yet. Poison Master and Soul Oracle were automatically excluded from the list of choices, so he had no choice but to pick Seer as well. While he hadn't read any books regarding the occupation, he didn't think that it would be too difficult for him to clear its trial good. The assessment will be very simple. The both of us shall be divining an event simultaneously, and as long as your conclusion is the same as mine, I'll consider it as your victory. The inceptive sage explained the rules. It went without saying that the assessment for seers would be related to divining. While each seer possessed a different level of ability from one another, as long as their divination was right, they should still arrive at the same conclusion. Understood. Zhang Xian nodded. All right. I'll divine that you won't be able to clear the Tower of Master Teachers today, the inceptive sage said with a smile. You are going to divine that I won't be able to clear the Tower of Master Teachers today? Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. This was a paradoxical statement. Clearly, the other party was intentionally setting up a trap for him. If he were to say something that he would be able to clear the trial, that would be at odds with the declaration made by the inceptive sage, thus spelling his instantaneous disqualification. But even if he were to agree with the inceptive sage and temporarily clear this floor, the inceptive sage still had the option to choose not to acknowledge his victory later on as long as there was a valid reason behind it. In other words, even if he were to clear the remaining 6 floors afterward, the inceptive sage could still revoke his acknowledgement under the grounds of his inaccurate divination, and thus, resulting in the overall failure of the trial. This sure was a scheming move. As expected of the inceptive sage of the Seer Guild, he sure knew how to corner others effectively. Indeed, as long as you agree with my words, I'll let you pass right now, the inceptive sage said with a smile. To be honest, even though it wasn't exactly the young man's fault, he still couldn't help but feel that the young man had some blame to play behind the Shrine of Seers' collapse and Elder Feng's slump. As the inceptive sage of the Seer Guild, he felt that he should get back at the other party a little. Otherwise, what would become of their dignity as the most mysterious Upper Nine Paths occupation? Can we divine something else instead? Pardon me, but I don't think that I'll be able to answer that question of yours. Zhang Xian shook his head. Unfortunately, this is the only question I have for you, the inceptive sage said with a wave of his hand. The other party possessed the discarnate constitution of divination, which meant that it was impossible to predict anything that had him in the picture. As such, a competition with the other party would simply result in his divination running awry. Since that was the case, he decided to play it foul just this once. And to be honest, he was also very curious to see how the young man whom Elder Feng was so obsessed with would deal with such a situation too. This is the only question you have for me? I see. All right, I understand. Knowing that the other party was intentionally making things hard for him, Zhang Xian shook his head helplessly. With a thought, he accessed the Library of Heaven's path in his mind. Kacha! Before the inceptive sage could process what was going on, his body suddenly went completely numb. A bolt of lightning had fallen on him, following which, more and more bolts of lightning struck down furiously one after another on the inceptive sage, and before long, he was already lying on the ground convulsing nonstop. What's wrong? Zhang Xian immediately rushed forward with eyes widened in a mixture of astonishment and worry. Have you revealed too many secrets of the heavens that you are suffering heavenly retribution at this moment? Kacha. The inceptive sage could barely force out a single word before another 2 streaks of lightning fell upon him, causing his body to spasm once more. It seems like you aren't in a really good state to assess me at the moment. Since that's the case, it doesn't seem appropriate for me to impose on you any further. If you have no rejections, I'll be heading up first, alright? Zhang Xian clasped his fist. No. Kacha. Under the furious assault of lightning bolts, even speaking a single word was extremely arduous to the inceptive sage. I'll thank you for your magnanimity then. If I have a chance in the future, I'll surely pay you a visit to relay my gratitude to you. Zhang Xian clasped his fist before heading up the stairs. If the other party didn't make things difficult for him, he still could have considered competing fairly with the other party. But since the other party was bent on cornering him, there was no reason for him to hold back either. In the first place, the actions of seers could be considered as not too much different from petty theft from the eyes of the heavens, so the other party was just reaping what he had sowed. You, the inceptive sage exclaimed in agitation, wanting to stop Zhang Xian from heading up. However, he noticed that the lightning bolt above him had grown more compact instead. Horrified, he hurriedly tried to flee, but he realized that no matter how agilely he moved, he was unable to escape from the lightning bolts at all. Eventually, the resigned him could only find a place which was more comfortable for him to lie at, allowing the lightning bolts to ravage him with deadpan eyes. On the 4th floor was the inceptive sage of the Painter Guild. The moment Zhang Xian stepped in, it felt as if he had stepped into an illusory world. Majestic mountains towered around him, creating a particularly aesthetic sight. Knowing that he was in an 8-star painting, it didn't take long for him to escape from it, thus clearing the assessment. The supporting occupation for the 5th floor was terpsichore, the one for the 6th floor was appraiser, and the one for the 7th floor was demonic tunist, and the one for the 8th was apothecary. Having read all of the books for those occupations, Zhang Xian was able to clear those floors extremely quickly. In just a matter of minutes, he was already right before the final floor. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward his final assessment. Since he had already cleared the prerequisite 8 supporting occupation, all he had to do was to clear the final cultivation assessment, and he would be able to be promoted as an 8-star master teacher. Pushing the door and entering the room, as soon as Zhang Xian got a clear sight of the person in the room, a tight knit immediately surfaced on his eyebrows. It's you! The person before him was no other than the person who was viciously pummeled by the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast before. The Zhang clan genius, who owed him 5 pinnacle spirit stones. Zhang Chun. The Tower of Master Teachers requires an 8-star master teacher to invigilate the trial. Both Luo Xianqing and I were qualified to be the invigilator. But it just happens that he has recently made a breakthrough to Dimension Sundering Realm, thus exceeding the cultivation realm allowable for one to serve as an invigilator here. So, I'll the one who is assessing you today. Zhang Chun chuckled softly. With a flick of his wrist, he took out a jade container and flicked it over to Zhang Xian's direction. Here are the 5 pinnacle spirit stones that I owe you. Catching the jade container, Zhang Xian kept it into his storage ring without bothering to check on it. His eyes remained firmly on Zhang Chun as the knit between his eyebrows tightened. Previously, he had the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast pummel the other party, so it could be said that there was a deep grudge in between the both of them. Now that there was such a good opportunity for the other party to exact vengeance, how could the other party possibly let him go easily? The other party had already expressed his attitude clearly by returning the spirit stones. Now that I owe nothing to you, I no longer need to have any reservations when dealing with you. May I know how will this assessment go? Understanding this fact, Zhang Xian heaved a deep sigh before asking. In order to become an 8-star master teacher, you need to possess strength equivalent to a Saint 6 Dan Grand Dominion Realm cultivator. Unfortunately, it appears that your cultivation realm is only at half Grand Dominion Realm at the moment, so I'll have to assess your strength personally to ensure that it has reached the required mark. A sharp glint flashed across Zhang Chun's eyes as he looked at Zhang Xian with a slightly unnerving smile. Rest assured, my assessment will be very easy. As long as you can withstand 3 punches from me, I'll consider it as your victory. If you fail to withstand it, I apologize. But I'm afraid that I'll have no choice but to fail you. Withstand 3 punches from you? Zhang Xian frowned. Considering how the other party had once fought him with his cultivation suppressed, the other party should have known his true fighting prowess. And to propose such a duel despite that clearly, the other party had no intentions of suppressing his cultivation at all. While Zhang Xian had made considerable advancement in his cultivation and fighting prowess recently, he was still a far way off from matching up to the Saint Seven Dan Phantasmal Space Realm Pinnacle Zhang Chun. Zhang Xian's mind swiftly whirred into action, but he was unable to find any way how he could clear this assessment fairly. Thus, after a slight moment of silence, he replied, "Fine by me. However, before the duel, I would like to change my clothes." "You want to change your clothes? Feel free." Zhang Chun was a little bewildered by Zhang Xian's abrupt request, but he still waved his hands leisurely, not paying Zhang Xian's request any mind. After all, the crux of a duel lay in one's fighting prowess. It was not as if Zhang Xian would be able to defeat him just by changing his clothes. "Thank you." With a casual wave of his hand, Zhang Xian set up an isolation barrier by the corner of the room and walked in. Not even 20 minutes have passed so far, right? Within such a short period of time, he actually managed to reach the 9th floor. This, before the Tower of Master Teachers stood a group of spectating master teachers and members of other occupations, and every single one of their teeth were clattering from astonishment. Their initial thought was that even if the young challenger was able to clear the trial, most likely, he would take several days at the very minimum, needing to overcome many difficulties before finally reaching the top. Yet, who would have thought that he would actually be able to reach the top within less than 20 minutes? This meant that he had received the recognition of the inceptive sages of the 8 supporting occupations within just 2 to 3 minutes after meeting each of them. Was that not too fast? Even though he has successfully reached the final floor, I don't think things are optimistic for him. An elder standing not too far away remarked grimly. "Why would you say so?" Luo Xianqing asked. This brother of his had truly surpassed his wildest imagination. All along, he had thought that there was no one who could possibly best his younger sister's record. But who knew that he would actually be able to reach the final floor so quickly? The final floor was mainly a trial to assess the challenger's cultivation, and considering Zhang Xian's frightening fighting prowess, it should be a walk in the park for him to clear the trial. Why would the elder say otherwise? From what I know, the person guarding the floor is Zhang Chun. I've heard that the both of them had some grudges with one another in the past, the elder said. Zhang Chun. Hearing that name, Luo Xianqing was startled. He could not help but clench his fists tightly together. Why would it be him? He knew about Zhang Xian's conflict with Zhang Chun as well, and if the latter was the one guarding the floor, it could prove hard for Zhang Xian to clear the trial. But under normal circumstances, considering that it was just a simple assessment of cultivation, it would suffice to find an ordinary 8-star master teacher to do the job. There was no need for a top-notch genius of the Zhang clan to make a move himself. I'm not too sure about the details either, but it seems like he applied for the role himself, the elder replied. As one of the core members of the Zhang clan, Zhang Chun had a massive intelligence network all over the Sanctum of Sages, allowing him to remain up to date with the various affairs going on. Considering that he had a grudge with Zhang Xian, it went without saying that he would apply to become one of the guardians of the Tower of Master Teachers. Damn it! If that fellow makes things difficult for Zhang Xian, I'll surely give him a beating. He will never forget once he comes out of the Tower of Master Teachers. If I don't make him bedbound for at least half a year, my surname won't be Luo. Luo Xianqing vowed viciously with gritted teeth. He had been wanting to pummel Zhang Chun ever since achieving a breakthrough in his cultivation. But before he could make a move, he had ended up learning about his younger sister's affairs. And in the midst of settling the matter, he had been forced to summon his lightning tribulation. In the end, before he could make a move, the other party had ended up making the first move. If that darn Zhang Chun intentionally made things difficult for Zhang Xian and failed him, he would never let that bastard go. If he did not beat that fellow up till the point where even his parents would not be able to recognize him, his name would not be Luo Xianqing. In the first place, the Tower of Master Teachers is known to be one of the hardest trials in the Sanctum of Sages. If Zhang Shi clears it too easily, others will only question the legitimacy of the trial in the future. Shaking his head, the elder was in the midst of his words when the ground suddenly began trembling. Boom! He quickly raised his head and saw a human-sized protrusion appearing on the walls of the 9th floor of the Tower of Master Teachers. Zhang Shi has been beaten up, the elder exclaimed. Luo Xianqing anxiously turned his gaze upward too. Boom! Another resounding explosion sounded, and the human-sized protrusion on the wall became even bigger. Stone fragments that had chipped off from the tower rained ceaselessly on the ground. Zhang Xian, Luo Xianqing muttered worriedly as he contemplated rushing in to save the other party. However, the next instant, he suddenly noticed something that made his eyebrows shoot up. Wait a moment, that body shape doesn't seem to belong to Zhang Xian. The one who is being pummeled isn't Zhang Xian? It isn't Zhang Xian? Taken aback by those words, the elder turned his gaze upward once more. But before he could examine the protrusion on the wall clearly, the protrusion suddenly burst open. Voila! A silhouette burst forth from the protrusion, heading straight to the ground. Pung! He fell headfirst into the ground, leaving only a pair of legs trembling nonstop outside, reminiscent of a leek planted in the ground. Judging from the clothes and the body shape, he was none other than the top-notch genius of the Zhang clan, Zhang Chun. How can this be? The elder's mouth opened wide in shock. He knew Zhang Chun's strength very well. Even at Saint Seven Dan Pinnacle, he wielded strength that was comparable to ordinary half-dimension Sundering Realm experts. Yet, facing a mere half-grand Dominion Realm cultivator, he was actually pummeled right down from the 9th floor, even to the point where he was unable to gather the strength to steady himself through his ability of flight. The elder rubbed his eyes forcefully, and he had to take several good looks at the situation before he was finally able to convince himself that he was not seeing things. The elder was not the only one who was flabbergasted by the situation. Even Luo Xuanqing's eyes were wide open. Zhang Chun had been viciously pummeled the previous time he challenged Zhang Xian, with his cultivation suppressed. Could it be that he still had not learned his lesson and chose to suppress his cultivation yet again? If that was the case, he really was a true masochist through and through. Boom! However, before he could think too much into it, the ground suddenly shook. A brilliant light burst converged from the surroundings toward the top of the Tower of Master Teachers, and a token materialized in midair. 8-star Master Teacher emblem. Congratulations to Zhang Xian for successfully clearing the Tower of Master Teachers and being promoted to 8-star Master Teacher. The voice reverberated throughout the Sanctum of Sages, echoing loudly in everyone's ears. Zhang Shi has cleared the 8-star Master Teacher examination? Within a certain room, Zhang Jiuxiao heard the voice from the sky and froze on the spot. At the same time, the cultivating Chun Liao's body also stiffened, and a hint of disbelief surfaced in her eyes. The other party was only at Saint Four Dan Primordial Spirit Realm Pinnacle when they first arrived at the Sanctum of Sages, possessing a fighting prowess that was beneath hers. But in less than a single month, he was already an 8-star Master Teacher. Even when witnessing everything unfolding with her own eyes, she still could not help but find it inconceivable. Such scenes were happening throughout the entire Sanctum of Sages, especially with those cultivators who had entered the Sanctum of Sages together with Zhang Xian. Shock was an understatement for what they were feeling at that moment. Even Zhao Xingma was completely rooted to the spot, incapable of speaking a word at all. He had known from the very start that Zhang Xian would accomplish great things in the future, but he had never thought that the latter would actually be able to become an 8-star Master Teacher within less than a month, and without attending a single lesson at that. As an 8-star Master Teacher, that young man could already be considered a figure that stood at the very peak of the continent, qualified to enter the inner sanctum. Senior sure is formidable. Feng Zi's mouth was agape too. Previously, he had still thought that as long as he worked hard, considering that they were from the same lineage. He would be able to surpass the other party one day. However, the voice had clearly told him that the other party had already reached a level far beyond his reach, and it was nigh impossible for him to catch up now. It's no wonder teacher would choose to take him in. With the other party's talent, it was no wonder his teacher would take in another disciple, even after telling him that he would be the only direct disciple that he would accept. Who? Reaching out to grab the floating 8-star master teacher emblem, a unique energy surged into Zhang Xian's body. Of course, there was no way he would be a match for Zhang Chun given his current strength. The reason he had been able to defeat the latter so easily was because he had let his clone out to take his place. After absorbing the energy from the lightning tribulation, his clone had become so strong that even a Saint 7 Dan pinnacle expert, like Zhang Chun, was bashed right into the wall with a single punch. By the third punch, the latter had already been completely knocked out, falling down from the Tower of Master Teachers helplessly. I have finally reached 8-star. Glancing at the emblem in his grasp, Zhang Xian could hardly suppress the excitement in his heart. Just as he was about to stow it into his storage ring, his eyebrows suddenly shot up, and a token surfaced in his palm. The Sanctum Head token. The token was emanating a warm glow, and it seemed like a seal placed on it was gradually undoing itself. There were 3 conditions required to unsealing the Sanctum Head token. Firstly, his master teacher rank had to reach 8-star. Secondly, he had to cultivate his Eye of Insight up to the 4th realm, Demon Vanquisher. Thirdly, his cultivation had to reach Saint 8 Dan. He was still some way off from accomplishing the latter too, but with his master teacher rank reaching 8-star, he had already managed to activate a portion of the authority and strength harnessed within the Sanctum Head token. Knowing that this was not a good time for him to check on the changes in the Sanctum Head token, he swiftly stowed both the token and the 8-star master teacher emblem into his storage ring, before slowly descending down from the top of the Tower of Master Teachers. Zhang Shi, congratulations on clearing the Tower of Master Teachers trial and breaking its record. Zhang Shi stepped forward and clasped his fist. Even at this point, he still could not help but feel as if he was in a dream. To clear all 9 floors within 20 minutes, winning the acknowledgement of 9 top geniuses of their Sanctum of Sages. That was a feat that even the little princess of the Luo clan was incapable of. If I may ask, am I qualified to enter the inner sanctum now? Zhang Xian asked with a polite smile. Of course. If you wish to head there now, I can bring you over, Zhang Shi said with a nod. To tell you the truth, there isn't much of a difference between the inner sanctum and the rest of the Sanctum of Sages, perhaps except for the concentration in spiritual energy. I understand, but I would still like to head there. I'll be troubling you to lead the way then, Sanctum Head John. Zhang Xian clasped his fist. At the other party's insistence, Zhang Shi nodded with a hint of approval in his eyes. The young man had just challenged a major trial, but he still insisted on heading to the inner sanctum instead of resting. Perhaps it was the difference in attitude that made the difference between him and the rest of the students. With such a thought in mind, he turned around and led the way forward, and Zhang Xian quickly followed him. Zhang Shi, seeing that Zhang Xian was leaving, Luo Xianqing hurried forward, wanting to talk to the young man about the matter concerning his younger sister. But at the last moment he stopped himself. Facing Zhang Xian's perplexed gaze, he waved his hand and said, "It's fine. You should take a look around the inner sanctum first. I'll look for you later at night." Considering that he was going to entrust the young man with a mission to kill the person whom his younger sister loved, he would have to ensure utmost secrecy for this matter. There were many experts present on the scene. Some of them were adept in soul arts even, so it would be best for him to find the young man later on and speak to him in a more private environment. After all, this was not a particularly honorable matter to speak of in public. All right. Zhang Xian swiftly assessed Luo Xianqing carefully and noted that the other party's cultivation was already fully reinforced. He nodded with a bright smile before following Zhang Shi to the inner sanctum. The inner sanctum of the Sanctum of Sages was not located in any of the 5 halls, but within a lake far away from the major infrastructure. Zhang Shi took out an insignia and waved it over the lake, and the seal cast over the lake swiftly came undone. Following which, a massive gate surfaced from the depths of the water, and particularly overwhelming spatial energy rippled forth from it. What formidable control of space! Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. He had already comprehended the three-dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, which granted him a deep insight into the essence of space. But to his shock, even with the eye of insight, he was actually unable to see through the gate before him. This could only mean that the person who had set up the door had achieved a level of spatial manipulation comparable to 4-dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, or perhaps even 5-dan. Folded spaces created by experts of that caliber were extremely steady, such that putting aside perceiving it, even if he really found their folded spaces, he would be unable to open them without using keys, such as the insignia that Zhang Shi had used. This is the insignia required to open the doorway to the inner sanctum. All students of the inner sanctum have one, and it serves as a representation of their identity, Zhang Shi said as he passed the insignia over to Zhang Xian. Taking the insignia, Zhang Xian lightly stroked its surface to feel its material before taking a closer look at it. There was a dense congregation of inscriptions on its surface, and surprisingly, these inscriptions bore a striking resemblance to the seal in the subterranean gallery that was used to cut off the otherworldly battlefields from the master-teacher continent. They were marks of a spatial formation. Dripping a droplet of blood on it to claim ownership of the insignia, Zhang Xian placed it in his storage ring. "All right, let's enter," Zhang Shi said as he led the way in, and Zhang Xian quickly followed suit. The moment Zhang Xian stepped through the door, he felt as if he had been transported through space. Before he knew it, he was already standing within a building. The very first thing that he noticed about his surroundings was that the concentration of spiritual energy was nearly twofold of that in the Sanctum of Sages. It was so concentrated that it felt as if it would form liquid spirit essence with just a simple grasp of his hand. What was incomparably valuable in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy turned out to be commonplace here. "It's indeed a blessed land for cultivation," Zhang Xian remarked. The higher the concentration of spiritual energy, the faster one would be able to cultivate. With how dense the concentration of spiritual energy was, even if one did not actively cultivate, the spiritual energy would still dive into one's body through one's acupoints of its own accord, pushing one's cultivation up gradually. If Zhang Xian had been there right from the start, even without using a single spirit stone, he would still be able to reach his current level of strength within a single year, or perhaps even higher. It was truly no wonder there were so many outstanding young experts in the sage clans. With decent talent and the best resources at their command, they would have to be a true sluggard to not achieve anything at all. Noting Zhang Xian's astonishment, Zhang Shi explained with a smile, "The most valuable resource in the inner sanctum isn't the higher concentration of spiritual energy, but the cultural atmosphere. Just by being here will grant one greater clarity of thoughts and a sharper spirit, thus enhancing one's rate of cultivation and learning." Zhang Xian pondered for a moment after hearing those words before nodding. The inner sanctum had been set up by ancient sage Boshang personally many years ago, and he had infused Kong Shi's will into this very space. This will have been further enhanced by the countless geniuses who had studied and cultivated there over the past several dozen millenniums, thus creating a unique atmosphere in the area that made one subconsciously desire to learn, cultivate, and reach greater heights. After allowing Zhang Xian some time to soak in the area's atmosphere, Zhang Shi said, "Let's go and pay our respects to Sage Kuei's sculpture first." "Sage Kuei's sculpture?" Zhang Xian asked with a hint of confusion. Even though the folded space was set up by ancient sage Boshang, it's mainly due to Sage Kuei that it's survived up till now, grooming many generations of experts. Zhang Shi explained, "As you know, folded spaces are inherently unstable, and this is especially so for spaces such as this that harness such concentrated spiritual energy. In order to prevent any mishap from happening, some kind of order must be actively sustained in here. And if not Sage Kuei's efforts over the many years, the inner sanctum would have long collapsed." Zhang Xian nodded in response to those words. In a sense, folded spaces could be compared to balloons. If they were not maintained carefully, putting aside growing larger, they would even slowly deflate as time went by. The only reason the myriad anthive nest, for example, had been able to remain so stable so far, was due to the myriad anthive queen sustaining it. Otherwise, it likely would have collapsed long ago. The same went for the mountain gate. It was due to the dissipation of sage Kuei's will that resulted in its swift collapse afterward. Considering how spiritual energy was even more aplenty within this folded space, it went without saying that it would be even more prone to instability. There was no way such a space could be sustained for several dozen millenniums without a powerful will guarding it. Soon, the both of them arrived before a massive sculpture. The sculpture was dressed in a long robe, and there was a particularly gentlemanly and refined look on his face. He shared the exact same appearance as the sage Kuei that Zhang Xian had seen back at the mountain gate, and the aura that he exuded was incredibly powerful. Even though the will within the sculpture was incapable of materialization, unlike the sage Kuei in the mountain gate, the sculpture seemed to harness some kind of spiritual power. With just a look, a cultivator would feel their thoughts suddenly becoming lucid. As expected of the first sanctum head of the sanctum of sages, to be able to instill a slight hint of deference within him just through a mere sculpture, there was no doubt that the strength that sage Kuei wielded back when he was still alive far exceeded that of the deputy sanctum head standing before him. Zhang Xian took a step forward and bowed deeply to pay his respect. Putting aside how powerful sage Kuei was, just on the grounds that he had cultivated many generations of experts, allowing mankind to enjoy several dozen millenniums of relative peace and prosperity, without fearing the invasion of the otherworldly demonic tribe, he was indeed worthy of respect. Not to mention, he had received the other party's heritage, the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld. However, it was a pity that despite the books that he had read over the past few days, he had not been able to find any that were related to optic arts. Otherwise, he surely would have perfected the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld and cultivated it well. Master, I sense my upper body. While Zhang Xian was deep in thought, Vicious' voice suddenly sounded in his head. Where? Part of the reason he wanted to enter the inner sanctum was to find Luo Ruoxin, but the other part was to help Vicious regain his strength. Hearing that his upper body had been found, Zhang Xian's eyes could not help but light up in agitation. It's inside this sculpture, Vicious replied. Pardon me, I was so overwhelmed by sage Kuei's imposing disposition that I lost myself for a moment. Zhang Xian quickly clasped his fist and apologized. This matter concerned Vicious, so there was no way he could say it aloud before Zhan Shi. Nevertheless, it felt like there was more to this issue. He would have to first make sense out of the matter first before making a move, so as to prevent any unnecessary implications from occurring. It's fine, I understand that feeling. I was also stunned for quite a while myself when I first saw sage Kuei's sculpture. It really felt as if an ancestor was standing right before me, imparting valuable knowledge. Oblivious to Zhang Xian's true thoughts, Zhan Shi let out a light chuckle. Zhang Xian nodded silently. At this point, a thought suddenly surfaced in his mind. If Vicious' upper body has been sealed in sage Kuei's sculpture, and is suppressed by sage Kuei's will, could this mean that it's unable to develop a new will? Each of Vicious' body parts, be it the heart, finger, or head, had all birthed an individual consciousness of their own. However, under the constant suppression of sage Kuei's will, there was a good possibility that the upper body might not have been able to successfully birth a consciousness. This would mean that his Vicious would have a much easier time assimilating it. Nevertheless, another major problem still stood in his way. In order for Vicious to assimilate his upper body, the sculpture would first have to be destroyed. However, that could very well cause the collapse of the entire inner sanctum. This was not an outcome that was acceptable to him. As the future sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages, how could he destroy such a precious legacy left behind by his ancestors just like that? Zhan Shi, may I know if there's anywhere like a cultivation technique library in the inner sanctum? My cultivation has recently reached half Grand Dominion realm, but I still haven't found a suitable Grand Dominion realm cultivation technique yet. The inner sanctum doesn't have any libraries, but it does have the cultivation technique forest, which contains the heritages left behind by the predecessors. Students who have just entered the inner sanctum are usually brought there, and as for what they receive, that is dependent on their luck. Zhang Shi said. Cultivation technique forest? Indeed. The cultivation techniques that are qualified to be passed down in the inner sanctum are all of Saint High tier, or Saint Pinnacle quality at minimum. But as you know, each cultivator possesses a constitution unique to them. Cultivating a cultivation technique that complemented one's strength could lead one to the very top, whereas cultivating an incompatible cultivation technique could very well cause one's cultivation to go berserk. As such, a cultivator mustn't choose their cultivation technique just by the merit of the might it wields. Zhang Shi explained. The cultivation technique forest is a place for cultivators to find out what cultivation techniques are suited for them and choose from them. All students in the inner sanctum get a chance to enter the cultivation technique forest to select among the cultivation techniques they are compatible with. Once they have made their choice, they will be unable to change it anymore. I see. Zhang Xian nodded. Cultivation techniques were similar to occupations in the sense that they would be suited to some people but not others. As such, cultivators would have to assess their own aptitude and choose the path they wished to tread on. Of course, advice from seniors could prove to be useful, but ultimately, no one would be able to make the choice for them. This was also the reason Kong Shi promoted the idea of the cultivation technique forest based on their talents. Just contain cultivation. There was no way a systematic lesson plan, but the wills of the predecessors cater to all students. They are able to sense your constitution some of their talents going and your current cultivation technique. If you wish to give it a try, walk through the forest, I can take you there. And if you aren't able to meet their prerequisites, that would be deeply appreciated. You won't even be able to interpret the content other than learning of the location of vicious upper body. This is a mechanism put in place to prevent important motive for him from biting off more than the inner sanctum. Was to raise his strength. Even though the young man before him had been placed under house arrest by the Luo clan, he was still much too young. There was no way she would be there. Zhang Shi could not wasting his warning him searching all around for her. In response to Zhang Shi's nagging, practical for him to raise his strength, smile, so that he would at least have the ability to protect her when the time would direct at their students. Please follow me. Thinking Zhang Shi said he often nagged the way students in such a way as well. Not too long later, they arrived in a place filled with stone tablets. Coming to understand what was with the cultivation technique forest, it really resembled a graveyard. Zhang Xian took a deep breath, the cultivation and walked in unhesitatingly. Every single tablet represents a certain cultivation technique through the cultivation technique forest and proceed through the forest slowly. Completely filled with stone tablets. The cultivation technique suited to you will jump out on its own. Silhouettes moving on the surface of the tablets. There's no need to feel tempted by other cultivation techniques profound martial arts. If they are unsuited for you, these silhouettes they are bound to inflict some grievous side effects on you. Which will limit your future accomplishments. Layer of thin mist. It simply isn't even worth if one were to examine the tablet closely. You mentioned that the suitable cultivation to perceive their movements will jump out on its own. However, Zhang Xian didn't need to perceive their movements to learn heard of a cultivation technique. All he really had to do was to direct a glance over at the stone tablets while muttering flaws. Usually, in his mind, be the one who would be actively seeking out cultivation technique true Inferno Yang formula to compile a complete ancestral path divine art for water undulation divine art. So he could not help but be materialized in Zhang Xian's just mind. What kind of cultivation there weren't just grand dominion realm cultivation technique manuals on the stone tablets. Some were phantasmal space realm cultivation technique manuals as well. If one were to cultivate according to them, there was no doubt that one's cultivation would surely improve by leaps and bounds, granting one fighting prowess far exceeding that of their peers. Those who were qualified to enter the inner sanctum were all geniuses, and those who were qualified to leave behind these cultivation technique manuals were, even more so, geniuses amongst geniuses, individuals who had stood at the top of their generation. Zhang Xian thought as he slowly proceeded forward, through taking in the cultivation technique manuals into his library of Heaven's Path. He was able to swiftly convert it into his own knowledge, thus allowing him to analyze the pros and cons of each cultivation technique swiftly. While these cultivation techniques were far from matching up to top cultivation techniques, like the heavenly art of Dimension Unravel, to most 8-star master teachers, they could still be considered as invaluable treasures. If any single one of them were to be taken out to the master teacher continent, it would surely induce a massive fight over it, as countless cultivators vied to lay their hands on it. Of course, This could bring in the question of why the inner sanctum didn't open up the books to the public. The sanctum of sages did allow those whose main occupations were not master-teacher to pick up a cultivation technique from the cultivation technique forest, as well so long as their main occupation had reached 8-star, and they were qualified to enter the inner sanctum. Nevertheless, this didn't change the fact that it still wasn't accessible to most cultivators outside. The reason for that was that the stronger a cultivation technique was, the more demanding it was on one's talent. If one simply didn't have the aptitude for the cultivation technique, but still forcefully attempted to cultivate it, not only would one's cultivation not improve as swiftly as expected, more importantly, it could potentially leave major traumas on one's body, resulting in unpredictable consequences. It was the same reason as why each occupation would only allow their members to view books corresponding to their current rank and below, and not those that were above their current rank. Without building up the necessary fundamental knowledge first, attempting to learn advanced content would, more likely than not, confuse one and possibly distort one's comprehension of the occupation. There was an inherent tendency within humans to overestimate their abilities. So in order to prevent such tragedies from occurring, there was a need to regulate the flow of information and knowledge, so as to ensure that they would only reach appropriate hands. While others are spending numerous hours in here just to receive the recognition of one predecessor and obtaining his cultivation technique, I am already collecting nearly every single one of the cultivation techniques. Zhang Xian thought gleefully. There was a diverse range of cultivation techniques here, and most of the stone tablets here were infused with the will of the creator of the cultivation technique too. Even if Zhang Shi were here, he wouldn't be able to learn all of the cultivation techniques either. However, Zhang Xian was different. Wherever his eye could reach, those stone tablets within his range of sight would be automatically compiled into a book within his library of Heaven's Path, and even their corresponding flaws would become apparent to him. As such, he was able to learn the cultivation techniques, even without receiving the recognition from their respective creators. Slowly walking forward, Zhang Xian relentlessly took in all of the cultivation techniques inscribed on the stone tablets around him. Over several dozen millenniums, the cultivation technique forest had accumulated more than 1,000 cultivation techniques, so it took quite a while before Zhang Xian finally reached the end. Compile! Zhang Xian willed. Countless books quickly gathered together within the library of Heaven's Path, fusing together to form the Grand Dominion Realm and Phantasmal Space Realm Heaven's Path Divine Art. Swiftly flipping open the two books before him to take a look, Zhang Xian couldn't help but shake his head in slight disappointment. Just like what he had guessed, the Grand Dominion Realm Heaven's Path Divine Art had been fully perfected, devoid of any flaws, but the Phantasmal Space Realm Cultivation Technique still had quite a few mistakes here and there. Clearly, he hadn't collected sufficient Phantasmal Space Realm Cultivation Technique manuals yet. How could Zhang Shi not receive the recognition of even a single predecessor at all? Seeing that Zhang Xian had walked out of the cultivation technique forest without inducing the slightest bit of response from the stone tablets, Zhang Shi frowned in bewilderment. Be it in terms of talent or fighting prowess, the young man before him had already reached an astounding level. Why would he receive no recognition from the predecessors of the cultivation technique forest at all? I haven't been driving my cultivation technique, Zhang Xian replied with a smile. His goal was just to collect the cultivation technique manuals in the cultivation technique forest, so he chose not to drive his cultivation technique. As a result of that, he hadn't received the recognition of any of the predecessors either. Besides, the cultivation technique he practiced was the Heaven's Path Divine Art. Which predecessor's eyesight would be so bad as to dare to recognize him? You have to drive your cultivation technique while walking through the cultivation technique forest in order to receive the recognition of the predecessors, so that you can obtain their secret manuals. To simply walk through it just like that, you won't be able to obtain anything like that. Zhang Shi exclaimed anxiously. It's fine, I have already obtained what I wanted. May I ask if there's any silent chamber here where I can cultivate in? I would like to digest what I have just learned. I think I might be able to make a breakthrough in my cultivation. Knowing that it would be difficult for him to explain the matter to Zhang Shi in a way that was acceptable to the latter, Zhang Xian didn't bother delving too deeply into the matter either. There's a silent chamber right there. A spiritual gathering formation has been inscribed in it. It can help you gather the surrounding spiritual energy, Zhang Shi said as he pointed toward a specific direction. Since the cultivation technique forest was a place for cultivators to pick up a cultivation technique and learn, the inner sanctum had also provided some silent chambers nearby for cultivators who suddenly had a sudden stroke of inspiration to sit down and ponder over it. Zhang Xian directed a nod at Zhang Shi before walking over to the silent chamber. He pushed on its entrance lightly and walked in. Perhaps it was due to the presence of the spirit gathering formation. The spiritual energy was even more concentrated than outside. At the same time, the silent chamber seemed to be made of some kind of unique material that completely isolated the space within from the external world, keeping all noises and even spiritual perception at bay, thus ensuring absolute silence to the cultivator inside. Nevertheless, Zhang Xian still swiftly took a look around the chamber, and only after ensuring that it was absolutely safe did he finally heave a sigh of relief. He flicked his wrist and took out the pinnacle spirit stones which Sun Chong and Zhang Chun had given to him. As his cultivation rose, the spiritual energy requirement of his Heaven's Path divine art had been steadily increasing too. Nevertheless, with 10 pinnacle spirit stones on hand, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to push for a breakthrough straight for Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle. Grabbing the spirit stones tightly in his hand, he quickly went through the Grand Dominion Realm Heaven's Path divine art once more as he conditioned his physical condition to his peak, before finally starting his cultivation. Gagaga. As if a lifted dam, spiritual energy swiftly gushed through the meridians in his body, and they were swiftly converted into Heaven's Path Jinqi, nourishing his entire body. Kacha. It didn't take too long for him to bash through his half-Grand Dominion Realm bottleneck, and his 1-meter radius dominion immediately began expanding, till the point that it covered a radius of 10 meters around him. Not only so, his dominion was clearly much denser and heavier than that of ordinary Grand Dominion Realm cultivators. Those who had unfortunately fallen into his dominion would be completely frozen on the spot, as if they had been shackled by heavy chains. Even though its radius was only at 10 meters, in terms of prowess, it was on par with even Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle experts. Continue. Expecting at least this much from the Heaven's Path divine art, Zhang Xian wasn't surprised in the least. With a slight smile, he continued his cultivation. Under the drive of his Jinqi, his cultivation swiftly rose, becoming stronger and stronger. Grand Dominion Realm Primary Stage, Grand Dominion Realm Intermediate Stage, Grand Dominion Realm Advanced Stage, Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle. In just 4 hours, his cultivation had already reached Saint 6 Dan Pinnacle, just a step away from achieving a breakthrough to Saint 7 Dan Phantasmal Space Realm. With the breakthrough in his cultivation, his dominion had grown larger enough to cover a radius of 50 meters, more than twofold larger than that of the 20 meters radius of an average Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle cultivator. Not only so, he also realized that the dominion he created was an isolated space from the rest of the world. Any external spiritual perception that attempted to delve into his dominion would be completely severed. As if falling into a folded space from this phenomenon in itself, he could tell that his dominion was already nowhere weaker than that of Saint 7 Dan cultivators. With my current strength, I should be able to subdue even Zhang Chun easily, Zhang Xian thought with a smile. With his cultivation reaching Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle, the phantasmal space realm Zhang Chun was no longer a match for him anymore. He didn't have to take a passive stance anymore. But again, Zhang Chun probably hadn't recovered from being pummeled by his clone yet, and at the same time, Luo Xianqing was also eyeing him tightly. Even if he didn't make a move, Zhang Chun probably didn't have any good days ahead of him anymore. The spiritual energy harnessed within Pinnacle Spirit Stones sure is immense. It took me only 8 of them to up my cultivation by an entire realm. It was no wonder why Luo Xianqing, Zhang Chun, and the others were able to achieve breakthroughs so quickly. reaching such high cultivation realms at their young age. With such resources to support their growth, it would be hard for them to not to grow so swiftly. While Zhang Xian was busy raising his cultivation, Zhang Shi was pacing outside the silent chamber with a tight knit between his eyebrows. Whenever other students entered the cultivation technique forest, they would drive their cultivation techniques as powerfully as they could, hoping to gain the recognition of as many predecessors as possible. Yet, that fellow simply took a walk through it before heading straight for the silent chamber. Could it be that none of the cultivation techniques in the cultivation technique forest caught his interest? But that shouldn't be. Those are all Saint High Tier and Saint Pinnacle cultivation techniques. It's more likely that he had driven his cultivation technique, but failed to obtain the recognition of any of the predecessors. With such doubts in mind, Zhang Shi turned his sights to the stone tablets by the side. With just a single look, he suddenly froze on the spot. The silhouette moving on the stone tablet had all stopped displaying their cultivation techniques. As if they were faced with something deeply frightening, they were shivering at the corner of the stone tablet, not daring to move or make any noise at all. Suppression of cultivation technique. Inborn deference of the heart. This is the cultivation technique of an ancient sage? Could it be that Zhang Shi is the direct disciple of an ancient sage? Zhang Shi narrowed his eyes in astonishment as he clenched his fists tightly together. Most of the cultivation techniques in the cultivation technique forest originated from Sage Kuei and the others' lineages. So if an ancient sage-level cultivation technique were to appear, the wills in the stone tablets would swiftly be suppressed. For all of these wills to suddenly become like that after Zhang Xian passed through the cultivation technique forest, it could not be that the cultivation technique that he practiced had already reached such a level, could it? If that was the case, it would be understandable why he was not interested in any other the techniques in the cultivation technique forest. Then, the reason he still chose to enter it would be to source some inspiration from them? Has Yang Shi already reached such a realm? Zhang Shi pondered in awe. Zhang Xian was Yang Shi's student, so the fact that he was able to learn a cultivation technique of such a tier should mean that Yang Shi had reached such a realm himself. Otherwise, it would mean that they had obtained the heritage of a true ancient sage. Regardless of which one it was, this was a matter that he could not afford to speak of lightly. This matter mustn't be leaked, Zhang Shi thought warily. If his deduction was true, he would have to warn Zhang Xian not to carelessly display his cultivation technique in public, or else once the otherworldly demonic tribe or some other greedy cultivators noticed it, his life could very well be danger. Even though he had already reached Saint Nine Dan in terms of his cultivation, the truth was that he was still only a half 9-star master teacher. A true 9-star master teacher was an existence that had already transcended the limits of the saint realm. Rumor had it that those who had reached that level would have their bodies tempered by celestial flames, thus cleansing their physical body and soul once more, and refining them to a higher level of existence. With that, they would enjoy a massive increase in their lifespan. At such a level of cultivation, they would be immune to poison. Even if they had been afflicted with some kind of deadly poison in the past, the celestial flames would also torch it clean, leaving no trace of it behind. It was for this reason that he had been trying his hardest to push for a breakthrough over the years, but unfortunately, despite his hard work, he had not been able to make a breakthrough to Saint Nine Dan intermediate stage. At his cultivation realm, there was a huge rift even between each cultivation stage within a realm. Each breakthrough would require a massive accumulation in one's cultivation before one could attempt to make the leap forward. Jia. Just as Zhang Shi was still deep in thought, the door to the chamber suddenly creaked open, and a figure walked out. Directing a glance over, Zhang Shi's eyes immediately widened into full circles, and he nearly collapsed on the spot. Zhang Shi, why your cultivation? It was only 4 hours ago that the other party had entered the silent chamber. So why would his cultivation suddenly leap from half-Grand Dominion realm to Grand Dominion realm pinnacle? That was practically equivalent to an entire realm. Was that not a little too fast? Noting Zhang Shi's expression, Zhang Xian explained, I had a sudden stroke of inspiration, so I was able to make a swift breakthrough. However, I think my cultivation will slow down in the future. With sufficient spiritual energy, the Heaven's Path divine art allowed him to advance his cultivation swiftly. However, as his cultivation grew stronger and stronger, the speed at which he could raise his cultivation was noticeably decreasing. So in a sense, his words could not be considered lies. It took a while for Zhang Shi to recover from his shock, and he could not help but give calm advice. It's good that you are able to advance your cultivation so quickly, but you mustn't rush things too much. If your cultivation increases too quickly, it could lead to your zhenqi becoming less compact, and the foundation of your cultivation becoming unstable. That would lead to a great deal of trouble in the future. In truth, it was not too difficult for a cultivator to raise their cultivation swiftly. Consumption of pills, cultivation impartation, and the awakening of unique bloodlines and unique constitutions. Any of those would allow one's cultivation to reach unprecedented heights within a very short period of time. However, if one failed to reinforce one's cultivation firmly before making a breakthrough, it would lead to the foundation of one's cultivation becoming shaky, thus making it extremely difficult for one to push for a breakthrough in the future. In a sense, this was similar to building a castle. If even the bottom layer was shaky and unstable, there would be a limit to how high it could rise in the future. For this reason, even those who possessed unique bloodlines and constitutions would have to pause for a moment after accomplishing some breakthroughs to reinforce their cultivation firmly before pressing on. I know. I have reinforced my half-grand dominion cultivation for roughly a day now, and it's already about time for me to make a breakthrough. Zhang Xian nodded earnestly in agreement. A day. Zhang Shi's cheeks twitched, and he staggered backward weakly, nearly falling to the ground from shock. He could not help but ask, "How long have you reinforced your Saint 5 Dan cultivation?" Even for top-notch geniuses, it would take several months before they were able to fully reinforce their half-grand dominion realm cultivation. And yet, the young man was actually saying that one day was enough. More importantly, he said such words with such a natural expression, as if saying this was to be expected. Do you really need to be so traumatizing? After a moment of pondering, Zhang Xian replied in a regretful tone, Saint 5 Dan? I made my breakthrough to the leaving aperture realm the day that I enrolled in the Sanctum of Sages, but due to being plagued with work during that period of time, it ended up taking me roughly 20 days before I was able to make a breakthrough to half-grand dominion realm. 20 days. Zhang Shi's body began shaking intensely. Staring at Zhang Xian intently, he asked, "Then, how long has it been since you started cultivating?" Since I started cultivating? Not expecting such a question, Zhang Xian did a quick calculation before replying. Roughly 13 months, I think, a little more than a year. If he had not transcended over to the Tianxian kingdom, but to the Sanctum of Sages, he would have been able to reach his current level of cultivation within just a month. That was a hulking 13-fold difference in time. Just the thought of it was enough to leave him feeling deeply suffocated on the inside. Zhang Shi suddenly did not want to speak to the young man before him anymore. To rise from fighter realm all the way to Saint 6 Dan pinnacle within just 13 months. That was a speed that was even faster than the little princess of the Luo clan. And yet, that fellow's expression seemed to be saying that he was discontented with the speed that he was cultivating at. Is it possible for anyone to get even more spoiled than that? Oblivious to the thoughts running through Zhang Shi's mind, Zhang Xian asked, Sanctum Head Zhan, do you have any Saint 7 Dan cultivation technique manuals? Can I borrow them for a look? Since his cultivation had already reached Grand Dominion Realm pinnacle, he needed to look around for Phantasmal Space Realm cultivation technique manuals. If he could perfect the Saint 7 Dan Heaven's Path divine art, he just might be able to use the last 2 pinnacle spirit stones to push for another breakthrough. In any case, the higher his cultivation was, the safer he would be. Saint 7 Dan cultivation technique manuals? I'm afraid that I don't have any of those with me at the moment. If you really need them, you can head over to the Corridor of Puppets. You'll be given a chance to choose from a collection of secret manuals if you clear the trial there, Zhang Shi replied. A Saint 9 Dan cultivator like him would have no use for Saint 7 Dan cultivation technique manuals. So naturally, he would not carry them with him. I see. Thank you for your suggestion. Zhang Xian nodded. He had been to the corridor of puppets twice, and considering the devastating destruction that he had caused over there, he felt really embarrassed to head there once more. However, since the other party did not have any Saint 7 Dan cultivation technique manuals with him, it would not be good for him to keep asking. Just as Zhang Xian was about to ask another question, Zhang Shi's eyebrows suddenly shot up. He flicked his wrist, and a communication jade token appeared in his palm. Taking a glance at the communication jade token, he frowned in confusion. Why would he be contacting me? Zhang Shi tapped his finger on the communication jade token, and the confusion on his face deepened. Wait, he isn't looking for me but you? Someone is looking for me? Zhang Xian was startled. Who is it? Jian Qinsheng, Zhang Shi replied. Jian Qinsheng is looking for me? Zhang Xian frowned. Jian Qinsheng was the descendant of the third sanctum head, Jian Lushui, and Zhang Xian had learned the flowing water swordsmanship from him. After unintentionally pummeling the Jian Qinsheng the previous time around, he had not heard any news from the other party. Why would the other party suddenly be looking for him at this moment? Not to mention, even contacting Zhang Shi to get to him. Let's head out. He's waiting for you outside, Zhang Shi said. All right. Zhang Xian did not know why Jian Qinsheng was looking for him, but it was thanks to the latter allowing him to browse through his collection of sword manuals that he had achieved his current mastery of swordsmanship. He felt deeply grateful to the other party's generosity, so naturally, he would not turn down a meeting with the other party. The two of them quickly left the inner sanctum, and as soon they stepped out of the door, they saw Jian Qinsheng standing in a gazebo just by the side of the lake. Upon seeing the both of them, Jian Qinsheng's eyes lit up, and he quickly walked up to them. Zhang Shi, Zhang Shi. Jian Qinsheng clasped his fist and greeted. After trading some pleasantries, Zhang Xian got straight to the topic at hand. May I know the reason behind your visit? Actually, I do have something that I need to trouble you on. Jian Qinsheng spoke up with slight awkwardness in his tone. Zhang Shi, are you willing to accompany me to the Zhang clan? You want me to accompany you to the Zhang clan? Which Zhang clan? Zhang Xian was taken aback. Is there a second Zhang clan? It goes without saying that I'm referring to the #1 sage clan in the world. Jian Qinsheng harumphed. I'm about to head there soon, and I hope that Zhang Shi can accompany me there. Me? Zhang Xian was unable to keep up with the situation. Pardon me, but why would you need me to head there with you? It was not like he was from the Zhang clan, so there was no point in him heading there, right? Besides, it was just a moments ago that he had given Zhang Chun a good pummeling, and to run to the enemy's home base right after. He still had many good years ahead of him, and he did not want to die a premature death just yet. Well, it's like this. Jian Qinsheng's face flushed slightly red before he started speaking. In truth, I have some history with the Xingming sword saint of the Zhang clan, and I once vowed that I would groom a successor who would surpass his. You should have met my students. None of them are really strong enough to shoulder this burden, so I can only hope for Zhang Shi to make a move in my stead. If he had not really been cornered to this point, he never would have troubled the other party. As fellow swordmasters, he and the Xingming sword saint had been rivals in the sanctum of sages, and they had competed with one another frequently. Eventually, he had become an elder of the sanctum of sages, whereas the latter had returned to his clan to serve as the deputy clan head. In view of their identities, they could not compete like they did back then anymore, so they agreed on competing through their students instead. And in the previous few battles, his students had lost tragically. The talent and bloodline of those in the Zhang clan were simply too powerful. Even their aptitude toward swordsmanship was also far stronger than that of his students. Initially, he had given up hope on this matter, but upon meeting Zhang Xian, one of the few aspiring, young swordmasters outside of the Zhang clan, he had suddenly seen a ray of hope. Unwilling to simply accept his loss just like that, he had chosen to buck up the courage to ask Zhang Xian this favor. Compared to the young man before him, all of his students were like frogs in a well. In fact, in terms of swordsmanship mastery, even he was not a match for the young man. What you mean is that you want me to challenge the Xingming sword saint in the capacity as the successor to your swordsmanship. Zhang Xian finally understood what was going on. He had seen Jian Qingqing's students, and indeed, it would be rather embarrassing to bring them out in public. Even the strongest senior Xia had been utterly defeated by him with just a strand of hair, completely unable to retaliate. That's not it. You wouldn't be able to stand against the Xingming sword saint even with your current proficiency in swordsmanship. What I hope for you to do is to challenge his successor, Jian Qingqing said awkwardly, considering how the other party had not learned the slightest thing about swordsmanship from him. On the contrary, the other party even provided him valuable pointers to bringing his swordsmanship to another higher level. It was indeed a little embarrassing for him to ask the other party to act as his successor. This, taken off guard by the abrupt request, Zhang Xian found himself at a loss. Even though he was extremely displeased with how the Zhang clan was treating Luo Ruoxin and wanted to teach them a lesson, he would still rather challenge them in his capacity as Luo Ruoxin's boyfriend than as Jian Qingqing's successor. Instead of turning down Jian Qingqing's request immediately, Zhang Xian frowned. Elder Jian, if you wish to turn the tables on the Xingming sword saint, you should be able to win fair and square soon enough if you use the modified version of the flowing water swordsmanship that I have given you to groom your successor. It shouldn't take too long for the effects to show, so there shouldn't be any need for you to be in such a rush, right? Out of guilt for destroying Jian Qingqing's residence and unintentionally severely injuring the elder, he had altered the flowing water swordsmanship and handed the manual over to Shui Qianrou. Given Shui Qianrou's aptitude toward swordsmanship, as long as she cultivated the modified manual strictly, there should be a massive leap in her fighting prowess very soon. Considering how she was Jian Qingqing's direct disciple, the honor and glory that he would derive from the victory should be far greater. After all, even though it had only been less than a month since Zhang Xian had come to the Sanctum of Sages, considering the various commotions surrounding him and his current identity as Yang Shi's student, it was likely that the Xingming sword saint would swiftly realize that he was not Jian Qingqing's student. Once that happened, it would render Jian Qingqing's efforts meaningless. The sword art that you have imparted to us is truly formidable, such that even I have benefited greatly from its ingenuity. If Shui Qianrou studies it diligently, she should be able to improve swiftly within a short period of time. However, I am indeed in a rush. The Zhang clan's clan assembly is just about to start, and if I were to miss this one, I don't know how much longer I'll have to wait for the next opportunity, Jian Qingqing said. Clan assembly? Zhang Xian was bewildered. What does the Zhang clan's clan assembly have anything to do with the challenge between you and the Xingming sword saint? This is a private grudge between you and the Xingming sword saint, right? Is there really a need for you to confront the other party during their clan assembly? Or does this mean to say that you intend to wreak havoc in the Zhang clan? But if the Zhang clan could be bullied so easily, there is no way it would have been able to survive so long and retain its position as the #1 sage clan on the master-teacher continent. All of the top geniuses of the Zhang clan would be returning to attend the clan assembly, so we'll be able to challenge their strongest sword practitioners if we challenge them at this event. Only when their best sword practitioners have been defeated can this be considered a victory for me, Jian Qingqing explained. And most importantly of all, if my successor can defeat all of the sword practitioners of the Zhang clan during such an occasion, I will be able to embarrass the Xingming sword saint and force him to acknowledge his loss to me. This, Zhang Xian was rendered completely speechless. However, there was indeed some sense into what Jian Qingqing was saying. If he wanted a good platform to defeat the Xingming sword saint once and for all, the Zhang clan's clan assembly was definitely a good opportunity to do so. If he could triumph over the Xingming sword saint before the entire Zhang clan, he would be able to cleanse all of the humiliation that he had suffered thus far. Of course, if he lost in such a setting, his reputation would be swept into the gutters. That's equivalent to putting your reputation and honor on the line. The stakes are simply too high. I fear that I'm unworthy of your confidence. Zhang Xian pondered for a while, but eventually, he still decided to turn down the offer. As much as he wanted to get back at the Zhang clan, He did not dare gamble with Jian Qingqing's reputation and honor. While everything would be great and wonderful if he won, he could not bear to imagine the consequences if he lost. As confident as Zhang Xian was in his strength, the implications behind this matter was simply too big. As an outsider to the grudge, he was unwilling to shoulder such a heavy responsibility. Hearing Zhang Xian's rejection, a bitter smile surfaced on Jian Qingqing's face. It seems like my request is really a little too abrupt. It was indeed a little inappropriate of me to attempt to involve you in my private affair, and I apologize for that. He had only met Zhang Xian once, and he had not imparted anything to the young man at all. On the contrary, it was the young man who had corrected the flaws in his cultivation. So in that sense, the young man could even be said to be his benefactor. And instead of repaying the kindness of his benefactor, he had made such an inappropriate request to the other party. It was understandable why the young man would turn down his request. Elder Jian, you needn't feel disheartened. If there's still some time, I can offer some pointers to Shui Qianrou's swordsmanship, and hopefully, she will be able to bring you glory during the clan assembly. Zhang Xian offered with a smile. I'm afraid that there's no time for that anymore. The Zhang clan's clan assembly will be held a month from now, and I'll have to start making my way over now in order to make it in time. Jian Qingqing shook his head. Considering how the young man before him had been able to see through his flaws and offer pointers to correct them, there was no doubt that Shui Qianrou's fighting prowess would improve immensely under his guidance. However, it was a pity that time did not allow it. The Zhang clan's clan assembly will be held a month from now? Zhang Xian was slightly intrigued. Shouldn't the clan assembly be usually held during festive seasons and the like? Why now? He seemed to recall Zhang Jiuxiao saying that the clan assembly would be held during the start of the new year, and it would only be the 11th month a month later. Did they bring their clan assembly forward? I heard that some unexpected situations occurred. It seems like the Zhang clan decided to hold their clan assembly earlier, to discuss the bringing forward of the matrimony with the Luo clan. Jian Qingqing paused for a moment before adding, however, that's just speculation on my part. The Zhang clan intends to bring forward the matrimony with the Luo clan? Zhang Xian widened his eyes in astonishment. Indeed, according to the rumors, it seems like the little princess of the Luo clan has someone she likes, and that has provoked the ire of the Zhang clan. Thus, they decided to bring forward the matrimony from the 3rd month of the next year to the start of the year, so as to prevent any unexpected situations from occurring. Jian Qingqing told Zhang Xian everything that he knew about the matter. Start of the year? A bolt of lightning flashed across Zhang Xian's mind as his clenched fists trembled intensely in agitation. If it was the 3rd month of the next year, considering how it was only the start of the 10th month at the moment, he would still have had 5 months to prepare. Given how swiftly his cultivation was growing, it would not have been too difficult for him to become the sanctum head of the sanctum of sages by then. However, if it was the start of the next year, he would only have 2 months to prepare. Time would simply be too tight for him. It was just a moment ago that he had heard that the Luo clan had grounded Luo Ruoxin, and the next instant, the Zhang clan had already brought their clan assembly forward. Were they really in such a rush to marry Luo Ruoxin? Those shameless bastards! Zhang Xian's face turned livid, and he felt raging fury burning in his chest, threatening to blow up at any moment. Ever since his transcension over to this world, other than the incident where Lu Chong was nearly killed while trying to save him, he had never been so angry before. To think that the #1 sage clan of the master-teacher continent would completely disregard a young lady's feelings and forcefully push her into a marriage. How were they any different from petty bandits? He had not wanted to blow things up out of proportion, but since they were this shameless, there was no need for him to hold back. Zhang Shi, noticing the huge fluctuations in Zhang Xian's emotions, Jian Qingqing and Zhang Shi were startled. 8-star master teachers possessed a transcendental state of mind, and they would be able to remain perfectly composed even as mountains collapsed right before their eyes. Yet, why would the young man get so agitated all of a sudden? Realizing that he had accidentally allowed his emotions to flow through, Zhang Xian quickly reined in his rage and replied, I'm fine. Then he turned to Jian Qinxing and said, Elder Jian, when are you heading off to the Zhang clan? Not expecting the young man to ask such a question, Jian Qinxing was dazed for a brief moment before he quickly replied, I have already prepared an aerial saint beast, and I'm intending to set off right after this. Very well. I'll accompany you to the Zhang clan, Zhang Xian said affirmatively. Hearing those words, Jian Qinxing traded glances with Zhang Shi. The situation was changing so quickly that he found himself being unable to keep up with it. It was just a moment ago that the young man had said that he was unworthy of his confidence, clearly expressing his reluctance to be involved in this mess. Yet, in the blink of an eye, he had suddenly agreed to follow him to the Zhang clan. After some careful thought, I feel that there's a dire need to teach the Zhang clan a lesson and bring our sanctum of sages flowing water swordsmanship the glory that it deserves. Zhang Xian exclaimed with a grand wave of his hand. Aren't you intending to hold a clan assembly to discuss the matter of marrying Luo Ruoxin at the start of next year? Very well. I shall make sure to wreak havoc such that you won't even have time on your hands to broach that subject during the clan assembly. Jian Qinxing was deeply moved by Zhang Xian's words. Bliss had simply come too quickly to him. He had never thought that Zhang Xian would suddenly accept his proposal just like that. Just that, he was competing with the Xingming Sword Saint to settle a private grudge between the two of them. What did this have to do with the flowing water swordsmanship of the Sanctum of Sages? Despite the doubts in his mind, Jian Qinxing was still delighted to have Zhang Xian on board with him. The young man before him had comprehended two different sword quintessences, so it was likely that his aptitude in swordsmanship far exceeded even that of the Xingming Sword Saints. With the young man making a move, he should be able to crush the Zhang clan's morale and cleanse the shame that he had been put through over the years. It's truly wonderful that Zhang Shi is willing to accompany me to the Zhang clan. When would be a convenient time for you to set off? Jian Qinxing asked. I'll have to make some preparations beforehand, so let's set off tonight. Zhang Xian replied. Luo Xianqing had said that he had some business for him, and this could very well concern Luo Ruoxin. Thus, he felt that he should first listen to what Luo Xianqing had to say before heading off to the Zhang clan. Hearing those words, Jian Qinxing heaved a sigh of relief and said with a smile, Very well. I'll be waiting for you in my residence, so come and find me there once you are ready. Zhang Xian nodded in response before turning to clasp his fist toward Zhang Shi. Sanctum head Zhang, I'll be taking my leave now. Knowing that Zhang Xian's mind was already made up, Zhang Shi did not bother to dissuade the young man out of this. Instead, he said, If the Zhang clan makes things difficult for you, let me know. Rest assured that the Sanctum of Sages will definitely stand up for you. Zhang Xian nodded with a smile in response to those words. He had half expected Zhang Shi to try and stop him, but looking at it once more now, how could the deputy sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages possibly be a cowardly person who was afraid of trouble? As one of the two major subordinate powers of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, if the Sanctum of Sages were to cower in fear before a mere Zhang clan, it really would not be worthy of the standing and prestige that the world had accorded it. Having made up his mind, Zhang Xian quickly bade farewell and left. Not too long later, he arrived at his residence. As soon as he landed on the ground, he was immediately welcomed by Sun Chong. Young Master Zhang Jiuxiao is here. He has been waiting for you for some time now. Jiuxiao? I'll go and take a look. Frowning, Zhang Xian quickly made his way over to the main hall. Entering the main hall, he saw Zhang Jiuxiao pacing around the room with an anxious look on his face. The latter visibly heaved a sigh of relief upon noticing him. He hurriedly walked up to him and clasped his fist. Zhang Shi, is this regarding your clan assembly? Zhang Xian asked. How did you know? Zhang Jiuxiao was startled. Let's put that aside for now. Are you here for that? Zhang Xian asked. That's right. I'm here to thank you for the guidance that you have offered over the past few months. There's no way I would have ever been qualified to attend such a major event without your help. To tell you the truth, I'm here to bid you farewell. My clan has already sent a saint beast over, and it's currently waiting outside for me. Most likely, I won't return to the Sanctum of Sages until next year, Zhang Jiuxiao said. As a member of the Side family, he should not have been qualified to attend such a major event of the Zhang clan. But under Zhang Xian's guidance, he had successfully enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages as a student. That was the only reason that he had been invited to the clan assembly too. As tight as his schedule was, he still felt compelled to pay one last visit to Zhang Xian to express his gratitude prior to leaving. After all, none of this would have happened without the latter's help. You didn't mention this the last time we met. Why are you leaving for your clan assembly all of a sudden? Zhang Xian asked. Despite his composed exterior, his heart was actually beating in trepidation. He was hoping that he would not receive the answer that he expected. To be honest with you, I'm not too sure either. I only received the notice to set off today. Those of the younger generation who are invited to the clan assembly must return to the clan within a month's time. I'm not too clear about the details, but it seems like they will be conducting some kind of selections. Zhang Shi, you also know that I don't possess much standing in the Zhang clan. It's already a huge blessing for me to even be invited into the clan assembly. There's no way that they would inform of something as confidential as that, Zhang Jiuxiao said awkwardly. It was not that he wanted to hide anything from Zhang Xian, but he was truly ignorant of the matter. All right, I understand. Zhang Xian waved his hand. Take care of yourself. Most likely, I will be heading to the Zhang clan too. So if you find out anything, do make sure to inform me. Zhang Shi, you're going to attend the clan assembly too? Zhang Jiuxiao was startled. I'll be heading there to settle some affairs, Zhang Xian said. This matter could very well draw the hostility of the Zhang clan. But don't worry, I won't put you in a difficult position. Fearing that the other party would think that he was asking him to spy for him, Zhang Xian swiftly reassured the other party to allay his fears. Zhang Shi, please don't say such words. It's only due to your guidance that I am what I am today. Otherwise, I could very well still be the self-assuming young man that I was back in Qingyuan City. Zhang Jiuxiao exclaimed in agitation. These were his earnest feelings. If not for the young man before him generously imparting invaluable knowledge to him, putting aside enrolling into the Sanctum of Sages, he would not have been able to clear Zhao Xingma's selections at all. It was precisely due to this that he was filled with veneration for the young man before him. You're too kind. As friends, it's only right for us to help one another, Zhang Xian said. I would love to be friends with Zhang Shi, but I know that I'm not good enough for that. Be it in terms of talent, knowledge, or eye of discernment, I am far beneath you. In fact, Zhang Shi, I hope that you can take me in as your student. Zhang Jiuxiao stepped forward and lowered his head deeply. This was something that he had been thinking about since a very long time ago. Having received the other party's pointers in his swordsmanship and cultivation, the other party could already be considered half a teacher to him. At this moment, since he was already on the verge of leaving, he could not hold this urge of his back anymore. You want me to take you in as my student? Not expecting to hear such words from Zhang Jiuxiao, Zhang Xian widened his eyes slightly in astonishment. While he might have offered a fair number of pointers to Zhang Jiuxiao, he had viewed the latter as a friend rather than a student all along. Who would have thought that the incomparably prideful genius would actually want to become his student instead? That's right, Zhang Jiuxiao replied with a resolute gaze. The others might not know much about the young man before him, but having been with the latter ever since his time in the Qingyuan Empire, he still knew a fair bit about him. For one, he knew that of the young man's students, Zheng Yang had become the progeny of combat of the Combat Master Hall. Zhaoye had become the young court chief of the Glacier Plain Court, and Yuan Tao was the most talented offspring, and possibly the next clan head of the Yuan clan. Those were the only 3 students of the young man that he knew about. But just the 3 of them were already more than enough to shake the master-teacher continent at its core. And it was one thing for his students to be formidable. But more than that, the young man himself was the only man to become a celestial master teacher in the past several dozen millenniums after Kongshi. Not to mention, he was the direct disciple of the most esteemed Grand Elder of the Master Teacher Pavilion. There was no doubt that the young man possessed unimaginable potential within him. If he could become the young man's student, he would be able to soar into the boundless sky along with him instead of remaining as a nobody in his clan. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before saying, I don't go easy on my students. Are you certain that you want me to be your teacher? Yes, I am certain, Zhang Jiuxiao replied. Very well. From today onward, you shall be my student. Zhang Xian nodded. Even though Zhang Jiuxiao's talent and bloodline were not on par with Zhang Chun, Zhang Feng, and the others, the greatest merit that he had over the rest of them was that he was incredibly tenacious. Under his guidance, the other party would surely be able to reach great heights. However, he was only going to take in Zhang Jiuxiao as his student, and not his direct disciple. With so many uncertainties surrounding his life at the moment, he was not ready to commit to accepting another direct disciple. Thank you, teacher. A hint of slight disappointment flashed across Zhang Jiuxiao's eyes when he heard Zhang Xian address him as his student rather than his direct disciple. Nevertheless, he quickly kneeled onto the ground and kowtowed. Being the student of a celestial master teacher was a great honor as well. To him, this meant much more than becoming a core member of the Zhang clan. I have a cultivation technique here. I want you to practice it well and reach Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle before we reach the Zhang clan. With a tap of his finger, Zhang Xian transferred a cultivation technique into Zhang Jiuxiao's mind. Currently, Zhang Jiuxiao was only at the leaving aperture realm, a huge way off from reaching the Grand Dominion realm. While Zhang Xian had offered the other party pointers in the past, those pointers were intended to resolve the flaws in his cultivation rather than to enhance it. After all, Zhang Jiuxiao was not part of his lineage, so he was not obliged to impart anything to the other party. But now that he had imparted a simplified version of the Heaven's Path divine art to the other party, as long as he had ample resources, it would not be too difficult for him to push for a breakthrough of 2 cultivation realms within a month. In a sense, this could be considered a trial for Zhang Jiuxiao as well. If the other party could not even achieve this much, he would not be worthy of being his student. Hearing that he had to reach Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle within a single month, Zhang Jiuxiao's cheeks visibly twitched. However, he swiftly gritted his teeth and replied solemnly, Teacher, I won't let you down. The higher one's cultivation realm was, the more difficult it was to raise one's cultivation realm. Even for the geniuses of the Sanctum of Sages, it would take several months of cultivation for them to push for just a breakthrough in their cultivation stage. Nevertheless, since his teacher had already given him the instruction, he would just have to accomplish it regardless of the cost. Boom! Seeing the resolve in Zhang Jiuxiao's eyes, Zhang Xian nodded in satisfaction. Just as he was about to issue a few more instructions, his mind suddenly jolted. A book had floated out from the shelves in the Library of Heaven's Path, and it slowly flipped open, revealing a golden gleam within it. A golden page? It had been so long since Zhang Xian had taken in any students that he had nearly forgot that the Library of Heaven's Path still had such a function. The power harnessed within each formed golden page was immense. Back then, he had planted one within Wei Ruyan in order to ensure her safety in the poison hall, and eventually, it had actually succeeded in killing one of the 4 eminences with ease. With the golden page as a trump card, there was no longer anything for him to fear in the Zhang clan. Zhang clan, just you wait. This time, I won't rest until my reputation as the god of destruction is imprinted deeply into every single one of your minds. Zhang Xian's clenched fists trembled in agitation as a vicious glint flashed across his eyes. Not too long after Zhang Jiuxiao left, Luo Xianqing came over. Upon seeing that Zhang Xian was in his residence, Luo Xianqing heaved a sigh of relief. Using a particularly complex set of hand seals, he sealed the surrounding space tightly before walking up to Zhang Xian. Brother Zhang. As you know, I don't like to beat around the bush, so I'll just get straight to the main issue at hand. I want you to kill a man for me. You want me to kill a man for you? Zhang Xian frowned. He had thought that the matter that Luo Xianqing was going to talk to him about was regarding Luo Ruoxin. But who would have thought that the latter would actually ask him to kill a man instead? As a master teacher and a member of civilized society, he believed that violence should always be the last resort, and he always made sure to conduct himself as such. Putting aside the couple of unfortunate accidents that would happen every now and then, the only time that he had truly played the role of an aggressor was when dealing with the Xianyuan kingdom. If possible, I would not make this request of you, but as long as this man remains alive, our Luo clan will never be able to live in peace. Luo Xianqing shook his head and sighed deeply. He would not make a move if there was another option, but this was a direct order from the first elder, and he himself knew what was at stake. There was simply no way around it. For his younger sister's sake, he would have to carry this out. What kind of man could possibly wield so much influence over the Luo clan? Zhang Xian was astonished. As the second strongest sage clan on the master-teacher continent, the ranks of the Luo clan were filled with countless experts. And yet, there was actually a man in the world who could leave them feeling so uneasy. Just who could this incredible figure be? Surely, he would be helpless before a person whom even the Luo clan struggled to deal with. Do you still remember what I told you about my younger sister the previous time we met? Luo Xianqing asked. Zhang Xian nodded in response. She's currently grounded in our clan. I recklessly summoned my dimension-sundering ordeal in hopes of gathering sufficient strength to save her. But it's a pity that I'm still far too weak, Luo Xianqing said with a solemn expression on his face. Zhang Xian nodded once more. Even if the other party did not explain it to him, he had already guessed as much. Like I told you the previous time, the reason she's being grounded is because the clan found out that there's someone whom she already likes, and I requested you to help me investigate his identity, right? Luo Xianqing continued. Yes, I still remember that. I thought that there isn't any concrete news concerning that man yet, Zhang Xian said with a frown. The last time that the other party had spoken to him about this matter, he had nearly been shocked out of his wits. Fortunately, it seemed like Luo Ruoxin had not revealed his identity. Nevertheless, that matter still left him feeling deeply pressured. Eventually, in order to save time and become an 8-star master teacher as quickly as possible, he had ended up challenging the Tower of Master Teachers. I have managed to gather new intelligence regarding the matter. During the period that my younger sister disappeared, she seems to have resided in a place known as the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy for quite a long period of time. I suspect that that man might be there as well, so I hope that you can head down there and root out that man, Luo Xianqing said. The Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Zhang Xian's lips twitched inconspicuously upon hearing those words, and his pupils narrowed slightly. With a slightly astonished voice he asked, "It can't be that you want me to kill that man, can it?" Judging from where the flow of the conversation was heading, it appeared that Luo Xianqing was about to request him to assassinate himself. He really had no idea what he should make of this situation. While others might not know who the rumored lover of the Luo clan's little princess was, how could he possibly not know who that man was? It was already hard on him to be asked to investigate and uncover his own identity, and now, he even had to assassinate himself as well. This was ridiculous. As expected of my brother. You understand me well. Luo Xianqing nodded in satisfaction. Why do you want to kill him? Zhang Xian asked with a frown. Won't the little princess be upset if he were to be killed? Luo Xianqing claimed that he doted on his younger sister. But here he was, plotting to kill the man his younger sister loved. Was that not hypocritical? Was it that difficult to simply grant her this simple wish? Would he only be happy after sending his younger sister down a road of tragedy, marrying a man who had never once appeared after their engagement? I know that she'll be upset, but this involves... Luo Xianqing exclaimed in agitation, but halfway through he suddenly froze. After which, he shook his head with a deep sigh, clearly not wanting to delve any deeper into this topic. He raised his head to look at Zhang Xian once more and said, "Just tell me whether you are willing to do it or not. As long as you root out that man and kill him, I'll accord you the position of at least an elder in the Luo clan." Elder? Zhang Xian shook his head. I don't need anything like that. I only want to ask if the little princess knows if you are aiming to kill the man she loves. You do know that once she finds out about the matter, this will become a permanent rift in the relationship between the two of you. You'll never be able to go back to the old days anymore. I understand all of that, but I have no choice. The discomposed Luo Xianqing cried out with reddened eyes. How can there be no other choice? At this rate, she'll become nothing more than a pawn for power. Why can't she pursue her own happiness? Does she really have no choice but to marry that young prodigy from the Zhang clan? Zhang Xian exclaimed fervently. Under Zhang Xian's relentless questioning, Luo Xianqing finally snapped. Yes, she has no choice but to marry the young prodigy of the Zhang clan. There's no other option for her to choose. Why? Zhang Xian asked lividly. To have to push his younger sister down a path that he knew she would never be happy with. No matter what, the Luo clan was still one of the most powerful sage clan in the master-teacher continent. They might be second to the Zhang clan, but they were definitely not subordinates of the Zhang clan. Shouldn't they at least possess dignity worthy of their positions? Honestly speaking, if he had not heard the news directly from the young master of the Luo clan, he would have thought that he was hearing fake news. That is your own younger sister. How can you possibly sacrifice her for a mere political marriage? Realizing that he had lost himself in the moment, Luo Xianqing forced himself to calm down before replying quietly. There are some things that you aren't qualified to know given your current standing and identity. Even I only have a partial understanding of the matter. I only know that in order to push forward this marriage, our Luo clan has already sacrificed far too much. If it fails to go through, not only will our Luo clan be in deep trouble, even mankind could very well find itself facing a catastrophe. Mankind? Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes in skepticism. To say that the failure of the marriage going through would actually result in a catastrophe for mankind. Was this for real? Was it not making a mountain out of a molehill? No matter how he looked at it, Zhang Xian just could not help but find Luo Xianqing's words utterly nonsensical. Judging from the look on Zhang Xian's face, Luo Xianqing could tell that the other party would not agree to his request if he did not make things clear today. So he hesitated for a short moment before saying, on the account that you are a trustworthy person and a brother of mine, I can share the news with you. However, this matter has major implications, so you mustn't speak of it to another soul. Otherwise, it could possibly lead to a disastrous outcome. In truth, the marriage between the Zhang clan and the Luo clan concerns the secret behind the Celestial Amulet of Legacy. Celestial Amulet of Legacy? Zhang Xian's eyes slowly widened in astonishment as he heard those 4 words. He had heard of the Celestial Amulet of Legacy before. It was an artifact left behind by Kong Shi, and it served as a key to the Temple of Confucius, where the great codex of Spring of Autumn lay. Was the marriage between the Zhang clan and the Luo clan really that important? If Kong Shi's most powerful artifact was really at stake, then saying that the entire fate of mankind was at stake would really be no joke. Indeed. However, I only heard of this news while eavesdropping on the conversation between our first elder and clan head. So unfortunately, I'm not too sure about the exact circumstances surrounding the matter. Luo Xianqing replied grimly. That is my younger sister we are talking about. How can I possibly be willing to shove her into the embrace of a person she has no fondness for? If not for the complicated circumstances surrounding the issue, putting aside him, not even the elders of the Luo clan would allow this marriage to go through. After all, given his younger sister's talent, there was a good chance that she could surpass even their ancestors. Once that happened, what would the Zhang clan count for? Nothing at all. Well, that was unless the young prodigy of the Zhang clan was even more powerful than her. But again, such a possibility was only minuscule at best. After all, in so many years, the only one whom he had seen come close to matching up to his younger sister was the young man standing before him, Zhang Xian. Given what is at stake, regardless of whether it's me or my younger sister, this is a responsibility that we won't be able to escape from. More importantly, this matter involves her as well. In any case, that man has to be killed at all costs. However, I can't do it myself, and there's no one other than you that I trust enough to entrust such an important task in. After saying those words, Luo Xianqing directed a deep gaze at Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian found himself at a loss for words. He knew that Luo Xianqing was in a difficult position. Even though he was close to Yuan Shao, by Hongyin, and the others, it was unfortunate that they were affiliated with other major powers. They could be trusted under normal circumstances, but if there was a conflict of interest somehow in the future, they could very well choose to sacrifice their friendship to support their own clan. After all, they would soon take on important roles within their own clans. And by then, they would be responsible for the overall welfare of their clan. With such a heavy responsibility on their shoulders, they would have no choice but to sacrifice their personal will at times. Considering that the reputation of the Luo clan and Zhang clan were at stake for this matter, it would not be a good idea to entrust this matter to them. And after eliminating them from the picture, the only one who could be trusted and would not have any conflict of interest was him. What's your choice? Luo Xianqing asked intently. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that I won't be able to accept your request. Zhang Xian shook his head. Even if there are many things at stake, what does that have to do with me? Why should I sacrifice my everything in order to fulfill others? Besides, to make me assassinate myself. How do you expect me to accept such a request? I want to know why. A deep frown appeared in between Luo Xuanqing's forehead. He thought that the young man would accept his request unhesitatingly, but he had been rejected instead. Zhang Xian paused for a moment, and eventually, he still decided against revealing his identity. To tell you the truth, I have some urgent matters at the moment, and I need to head over to the Zhang clan right now. I don't think that I'll have the time to head down to the Qingyuan Empire and assassinate that man. Even if he wanted to reveal his identity, this was not the right moment to do so. If he had to do it, it should be done before the Zhang clan with him carrying the air of a conqueror. You need to head over to the Zhang clan? For what? Luo Xianqing was visibly surprised to hear that news. The Zhang clan is holding its clan assembly very soon, and Jian Qinxing hopes that I can challenge the Xingming Sword Saint's successors, so as to exact vengeance for the humiliation he has suffered in the past, Zhang Xian explained. Jian Qinxing? That old sword freak? I do recall him having a grudge with the head of the Zhang clan. Indeed, this is a good opportunity to put down the Zhang clan, so you should definitely go. Luo Xianqing was dazed for a moment before nodding in realization. What happened between the two of them? Is their grudge really just due to the difference in the sword quintessences they have comprehended? Zhang Xian asked curiously. The sword quintessence that Jian Qinxing had comprehended was relating to the flowing water swordsmanship, a defensive sword quintessence. Even though he had never seen the Xingming Sword Saint's swordsmanship before, it should be safe to assume that the sword quintessence that the latter had comprehended was vastly different from Jian Qinxing's. Otherwise, the Zhang clan's genius, Zhang Su, would not have been rejected by the will of the third sanctum head. Actually, it isn't that complicated. Do you know where the title Xingming Sword Saint originated from? Luo Xianqing asked. Zhang Xian shook his head. All he knew about the Xingming Sword Saint was that the latter was the incumbent head of the Zhang clan, the father of the young prodigy. As for his true name and the origin of his nickname, he really did not know a thing at all. Could it be that his name is Zhang Xingming? Zhang Xian asked with a frown. It would be truly hilarious if the head of the Zhang clan, one of the top experts on the master-teacher continent, had such a feminine name. Of course not. In truth, the Xingming and Xingming Sword Saint refers to two different individuals. It's derived from taking the Xing character from the name of the head of the Zhang clan, and the Meng character from his wife's. When addressed separately, they are known as the Xing Sword Saint and the Meng Sword Saint. However, due to the overwhelming prowess from the combined might of their swordsmanship, which struck fear even in the hearts of the elders of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, they eventually came to be collectively known as the Xingming Sword Saint. Luo Xianqing explained. Hearing that, Zhang Xian widened his eyes in astonishment. In order to become an elder of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, one's cultivation needed to have exceeded Saint 9 Dan, and yet, the both of them were still able to instill deep fear into the hearts of such experts. It was already beyond Zhang Xian's imagination how powerful they could possibly be. Indeed, back then, the both of them traveled across the entire Master-Teacher continent as a pair, and there was nearly no one who could match them. Even your teacher is filled with praise for them, Eventually, the Xing Sword Saint inherited the position of the deputy clan head and received the deepest heritage of the Zhang clan, thus pushing his strength and swordsmanship to greater heights. On the other hand, the Meng Sword Saint has rarely appeared since then, and as time went by, her previous reputation ended up being heaped on the Xing Sword Saint instead, resulting in very few knowing of her existence, Luo Xianqing explained. As a core member of the Luo clan, Luo Xianqing was well informed on those who stood at the top echelon of the master-teacher continent. I see. However, what does that have to do with Elder Jian Qinsheng? Could it be that he lost tragically to the Xing Sword Saint back then? Zhang Xian asked doubtfully. If there was not a deep-seated grudge between the both of them, there should not be a need for Jian Qinsheng to make use of the Zhang clan's clan assembly to get back at the Xing Sword Saint. Right? That was almost as good as declaring his hostility toward the entire Zhang clan. Lost tragically? Tragically is an understatement. Luo Xianqing shook his head. If the news I have is accurate, it would appear that Elder Jian Qinsheng used to be a fervent pursuer of the Meng Sword Saint. Fervent pursuer. Zhang Xian was stumped into silence. He had thought that it was just a simple rivalry, but to think that there would be so much drama behind it. Then again, he should have thought of it. Only such an emotion could possibly lead to so many years of persistence from Jian Qinsheng. For example, if he were to steal Luo Ruoxin away, the young prodigy of the Zhang clan would surely challenge him frenziedly for decades, or even centuries to come. In the first place, those who practice swordsmanship tended to be extremely obstinate and unyielding individuals. So how could they possibly be able to keep an open mind to other things? Indeed, I really have to say kudos to Jian Qinsheng's obstinacy. Even now, he's still unwilling to find another mate. Forget it, let's not talk about them anymore. Well, I do understand that it's important for you to head over to the Zhang clan. Luo Xianqing was deeply conflicted. Killing the man whom his younger sister had fallen in love with was important, but he was not willing to let such a good opportunity to humiliate the Zhang clan go either. Due to his younger sister, he had been tirelessly finding ways to put them down, and this was clearly a darn good occasion to do so. Indeed, pardon me for not being of any help to you in this matter. Zhang Xian shook his head. A moment later, he raised his gaze once more and asked deeply, "Is it the Luo clan's or Zhang clan's intention to kill that man? Is there a difference between the two? Even if we don't make a move, the Zhang clan will very soon make a move too. By then, things would only get far more troublesome." Luo Xianqing shook his head. Ever since his younger sister had admitted her love for that man's fate had already been sealed. There was no way that the Zhang clan and Luo clan could allow this ticking time bomb to continue existing. Zhang clan, on the other hand, hearing that the Zhang clan had intentions to kill him too, Zhang Xian clenched his teeth in fury. How can they have the cheek to call themselves the #1 sage clan of the master-teacher continent, when all they do is commit such despicable acts? Wait a moment, they are shameless, that's why. It was one thing to force Luo Ruoxin to marry the young prodigy of the Zhang clan, but now, they were even intending to kill him as well. Just how lawless could they get? It's fine. Luo Xianqing sighed deeply. It goes without saying, but you must keep all of this a secret. No matter the circumstances, it mustn't reach the ears of another soul. Don't worry, my lips are tightly sealed. Zhang Xian nodded. Actually, I think that it would be good for you to discuss this matter with the little princess before making a decision. Otherwise, this incident could drive a wedge in the relationship between you and your younger sister. Luo Xianqing was silent for a moment before nodding slowly. I'll think about that. The main issue was that his younger sister was still grounded, and he had no way to contact her. Or else he definitely would have found a way to do so. I'll be taking my leave first then. Zhang Xian clasped his fist before heading for Jian Qinsheng's residence. Luo Xianqing watched as Zhang Xian vanished in the night sky before he shook himself out of his daze. He left the residence too, but instead of returning back to his own accommodations, he headed to the Hall of Integrity. Walking up to the counter, he instructed, "I want detailed intelligence about the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. It's an organization located in the Qingyuan-conferred empire. Since he was unable to engage Zhang Xian's help for that matter, he had no choice but to do it himself. Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy? Noted. Young Master Luo, please give me a moment. I'll look it up right now. The attendant was a young lady in her early 20s, and recognizing Luo Xianqing, she did not dare show the slightest bit of disrespect toward him. She quickly rushed into a room, and not too long later, she returned with a book in hand. Any information concerning master teachers would have to be submitted to the headquarters. And considering that the Sanctum of Sages was a subsidiary organization of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, there were various channels that they could use to procure the information. The Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy is located in Hongyuan Tier 1 Empire, and the strongest expert there is only at St. Wendan Pinnacle. The attendant began to recite the information in the book. Only St. Wendan Pinnacle? Luo Xuanqing's cheeks twitched. Were his younger sister's eyes not a little too poor? Even the strongest expert in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy was only at that level. Just what charm did that man possess to be able to win her fancy, such that she would even go against the Luo clan and Zhang clan for him? It's a low-ranked Master Teacher Academy capable only of grooming 6-star Master Teachers, so it's inevitable that the cultivators there would be slightly lacking. The attendant hurriedly replied. Where is it located? Luo Xianqing asked. It's located more than 1,000,000 li away from here. St. 8 Dan beasts require roughly half a month of flight in order to reach there. Here is a map for your reference, the attendant said as she took out a map and showed it to Luo Xianqing. Half a month? That's still fine. Luo Xianqing heaved a sigh of relief. If he could get to the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy within half a month, he should be able to eliminate that man ahead of the Zhang clan. With a quick scan, Luo Xianqing swiftly memorized all of the details on the map before turning around to leave. However, before he could walk out of the doorstep, he suddenly recalled a matter and turned around to ask, do you happen to have any information on some of the more outstanding master teacher from the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy in recent years? Considering how his younger sister liked that man, and was even full of praise for him, even if that man's cultivation and master teacher rank were only SOSO, he should still at least possess some exceptional talent in some fields. In a small place like the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, he should be able to shine like a pearl amid pebbles, catching the eyes of everyone. The attendant pondered for a moment before replying, I'm afraid that I'm unable to access that information with my level of clearance. If young Master Luo isn't in a rush, I can invite an elder over to help you check on the matter. She was only an attendant of the Hall of Integrity, so she could only look into more general information. In order to obtain more detailed information, such as the names of the master teachers residing in a location, they would require the clearance of an elder. After thinking about it for a brief moment, Luo Xianqing nodded. If he could find out the identity of the man whom his younger sister liked, he could assign others to do the job in his stead, thus avoiding the long journey down to the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. He waited for roughly an hour on the spot, before an elder hurriedly walked out from one of the inner rooms of the Hall of Integrity. Whether it was Luo Xuanqing standing as a core member of the Luo clan, or his notorious title, as the King of Destruction in the Sanctum of Sages, he was not someone whom ordinary managerial elders could afford to offend. The elder hurriedly walked up to Luo Xianqing and retrieved a book from his storage ring. He took a moment to swiftly flip through the entire book before he closed it and said, Young Master Luo, I have browsed through the records of all notable master teachers in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy over the past 5 years, and there is indeed one who enjoys great fame and prestige there. Enjoys great fame and prestige? Tell me more. Luo Xuanqing's eyes immediately lit up. This master teacher came to fame roughly half a year ago. He originates from a humble unranked kingdom, and with his own strength, he slowly paved his way up through the ranks. He has successfully crashed 2 master teacher pavilions, and he has foiled a major ploy from the otherworldly demonic tribe, and slain 10 otherworldly demon kings, and 1 otherworldly demon emperor, thus contributing immensely to mankind. Furthermore, he has successfully built a kingdom into an empire, and groomed many talented students. Eventually, he even became the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. The elder said, "No doubt about it, he must be the person I am looking for." Only their ancestor had ever successfully crashed a master teacher pavilion before. The fact that the other party was able to do it too showed that he was a man of great talent. That aligned with his younger sister's description. Most likely, that fellow was the person whom his younger sister liked. "What's that person's name? Is he still in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy?" Luo Xianqing asked. "This, young Master Luo. I'm afraid that I don't have the authority to track down his recent whereabouts. But as for his name, I think I should still be able to find it. His name is..." As he spoke, the elder flipped open the book once more and took a closer look at the records. A moment later, his eyes narrowed in astonishment. Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian. Luo Xuanqing's eyes narrowed as well. He anxiously turned his gaze over to the elder and asked agitatedly, "Which Zhang and which Xian?" "Zhang, as in the Zhang with the side characters of Bao and Long, and Xian, as in the Xian from hanging on a noose," the elder explained. "The both of them have the exact same name? This can't be possible, right?" It was as if an explosion had occurred in Luo Xuanqing's mind. With widened eyes, he staggered backward weakly, his face pale with disbelief. That name was identical to that of his good brother. They couldn't possibly be the same person, right? He had only hung out with Zhang Xian because the young man's temperament was to his liking, and to him, all that really mattered was that the young man wasn't from the darn Zhang clan. As such, he had never thought of looking into the young man's origin. Could he really be from Qingyuan Empire too? If that was truly the case, wouldn't that mean that the man he had been looking for was the very same person he had called his brother all this while? Luo Xuanqing's body trembled uncontrollably as the various scenes of how he came to meet Zhang Xian flashed across his mind. The first they met, the young man had said, "Your sister," to his face, and ended up being pummeled into the ground. After the incident, the young man suddenly became exceptionally nice to him, never hesitating to offer a helping hand in his time of need. And all of this, it went without saying that he attributed them to his personal charisma, but could it actually be because of his younger sister? Young Master Luo. Noticing the huge fluctuations in Luo Xuanqing's mood, the elder couldn't help but quiver in fear, fearing that the other party would vent his anger on him. "I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me." Luo Xianqing exhaled deeply and calmed himself down. "I would like to look into the background of a student from our Sanctum of Sages Elite Division. It should be much easier to obtain information on a student in the Sanctum of Sages." "Young Master Luo, whose background do you want me to look into?" the elder asked. "I want you to look into a student who has just enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages, just earlier this year, Zhang Xian," Luo Xianqing said. "Actually, there's no need to look up that. Zhang Shi is the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy that I have just spoken about." Hearing that name, the elder couldn't help but chuckle softly, and he remarked in admiration, "Despite coming from an unranked kingdom, Zhang Shi has managed to progress this far within a short period of time, successfully becoming an 8-star master teacher when he had just barely stepped into his 20s. Due to his legendary accomplishments, Zhang Shi is regarded as the new idol amongst the student populace of the Sanctum of Sages. In fact, the young lady who has attended to you earlier is his loyal fan." "Idol? Fan?" Luo Xianqing quickly turned his gaze toward the young lady who had attended to him earlier, and saw that the latter's eyes were twinkling in reverence upon hearing her idol's name being called. It was to the point that he could almost imagine saliva streaming down the corner of her lips. "Damn it!" Luo Xianqing bellowed furiously as he stabbed his fingers deep into the flesh of his palm. In this moment, he felt as if a million ants were running across his scalp. An unimaginable rage bubbled furiously within him. In less than a month after coming to the Sanctum of Sages, that fellow had actually seduced so many young ladies, converting every single one of them into his devoted fan. Given how his younger sister had no experience with the opposite gender, it was no wonder why she would end up falling into that fellow's trap. "I thought of you as my brother. But you flirted with my younger sister? More importantly, you even acted so innocently before me, Zhang Xian. Just how much more shameless can you get? Luo Xianqing couldn't stop his lips from quivering in shock. He felt like he had fallen into the other party's trap, right from the very start. He intentionally got close to me in order to obtain news about my younger sister. This won't do. I must kill that despicable bastard. Frenzied with fury, killing intent billowed through Luo Xuanqing's veins. Previously, he was still a little hesitant at the notion of killing his younger sister's lover. But now that he knew who that man was, and the despicable means that man resorted to, he couldn't suppress his fury any longer. All along, you are the person whom my younger sister likes. And yet, you feigned ignorant whenever I brought up the topic, acting as if you were an outsider to the matter. To think that I actually thought of someone like you as my brother, this must be the greatest stain of my life. More importantly, I even foolishly told you everything I knew. It's no wonder why he turned down my request. How could he possibly kill himself? The more Luo Xianqing thought about this matter, the more infuriated he became. If his emotions could materialize, the area around him would be swiftly overwhelmed by a raging inferno and burned down to cinders. This isn't good. Hurry up and get Elder Go over. Tell him that the King of Destruction is going to destroy the Hall of Integrity. Seeing that the young man's strength was on the verge of bursting forth, the elder's face immediately paled in fright, and he hurriedly turned his head around to instruct the female attendant. As a managerial elder, his cultivation was only at St. Seven Dan, a long way off from matching up to Luo Xianqing. If they were to go head-to-head with one another, there was no way he would be a match for the other party. Sensing the dangerous aura shrouding around the young man before him, he couldn't help but recall the various, incredible accomplishments of the young man before him. At this point, there was little doubt that the young man was going to do something very soon. Yes, Elder. The attendant hurriedly nodded. But just as she was about to turn around and leave, Luo Xianqing suddenly appeared right before her eyes. With reddened eyes he roared, "Tell me, why do you revere that Zhang Xian so much? Is he stronger than me? Is he more good-looking than me?" In terms of strength, he was a Saint 8 Dan expert, whereas Zhang Xian was only at Grand Dominion Realm pinnacle. In terms of looks, that fellow was no different from a Fighter 1 Dan to his Saint 9 Dan. He just couldn't understand why others would idolize that fellow instead of him. Aiwahai. Feeling the immense pressure that Luo Xianqing was emanating, the young lady's face paled in fright, and she began to bawl uncontrollably. "Let go of her," the elder bellowed angrily. It was only in this moment that Luo Xianqing finally regained his rationality, but even that was insufficient to quench the indignance that he felt inside. To show a look of reverence when speaking of Zhang Xian, only to be scared into tears when facing him. Why? The elder could guess what Luo Xianqing was thinking of just by the look on his face, and he suddenly felt completely speechless. Just by that terrifying look on your face, it would take a miracle for any girl to like you. Take a look at Zhang Xian. Even before the most frightening lightning tribulation, he was still able to stand firmly with a composed smile on his face, diving into it fearlessly, and eventually send it fleeing. Even now, take a look at yourself. How can you ever begin to compare with him? Forget it, I'll kill that fellow right now. Knowing that he wouldn't be able to get an answer out of the female attendant's mouth, Luo Xianqing spat coldly as he dashed straight for Jian Qingqing's residence. Now that he had found out that Zhang Xian was the culprit who had seduced his younger sister, there was no reason for him to hesitate anymore. There would be more than enough time for him to think the matter through after smashing that fellow's head into the ground. It didn't take long before he was standing right above Jian Qingqing's residence, and he bellowed loudly, "Luo Xianqing is here to pay a visit to Elder Jian." His deep voice reverberated deafeningly throughout the entire residence, reminiscent of the rumbling of thunder. "Luo Xianqing, what are you up to this time around?" A mere instant after Luo Xuanqing's loud voice echoed throughout the entire residence, an infuriated voice suddenly sounded, following which, a beautiful figure flew over. "Shui Qianro. Qianro, what are you doing here?" Luo Xianqing was so surprised to see the young lady that the imposing disposition he carried a moment ago began withering away. Jian Qinxing is my teacher, so there shouldn't be any problem with me living in his residence, right? Shui Qianrou harumphed coldly. Like I have told you before, I don't have the slightest bit of feelings for you. If you continue harassing me like this, I'll have no choice but to call on my clan to deal with you. Luo Xianqing was rendered speechless. The truth was that when he boasted to Zhang Xian back then that he had a beautiful girlfriend, he wasn't entirely lying. It was just that his beautiful girlfriend of his hadn't accepted his confession yet. And the unbelievably beautiful girlfriend he had referred to then was none other than Shui Qianrou. Luo Xianqing was intending to say that he wasn't here for Shui Qianrou but Zhang Xian. But the latter's words triggered the intense feelings of indignance within him once more. And he exclaimed, "Just what kind of man do you like? I can always change if there's anything I'm lacking in." Given the outstanding and dashing man he was, why didn't the other party like him? He simply couldn't understand it. What kind of man do I like? Shui Qianrou harumphed coldly. The man that I like must possess unparalleled talent in swordsmanship. He must possess utmost discerning eyes that are capable of seeing through and complementing all of my flaws. And more importantly, he must be able to impart to me profound swordsmanship. Impart to you profound swordsmanship? It can't be that. Luo Xianqing suddenly widened his eyes as he shook his head in disbelief, hoping that everything was just his imagination. That's right, I like men who are like Zhang Xian. As for you, Shui Qianrou waved her hands disdainfully. You should just give it a rest. Luo Xianqing is asking him, what are the Chinese characters for Zhang Xian's name? To see if it might just be another person with a similar sounding name. In Chinese, there are many words that have the same pronunciation, but different meaning and characters. For example, and are both pronounced as Zhang, and have the exact same intonation, but have different meanings. For Zhang, it consists of two parts, namely bao and long. As for Xian, it could mean suspense or hanging. But perhaps the elder has some grudge with Zhang Xian. He decides to describe it in the worst way possible by referring it to hanging. You bastard! Luo Xuanqing's rage finally reached the peak and exploded. It was one thing for the younger sister whom he doted on so dearly to be seduced by that fellow whose emotional quotient could be said to be pretty much zero. But to think that the goddess whom he had been infatuated with for so many years would actually be full of admiration for him too at this moment. No words could begin to describe how crazed he felt on the inside. I treated you as my brother, but you ended up seducing my younger sister, and the person I love unforgivable. Zhang Xian, you better scram out here right now. Unable to hold it back any longer, Luo Xianqing roared in fury. Seeing how the other party's words were getting more and more overboard, daring to threaten Zhang Shi even, Shui Qianrou finally snapped. Luo Xianqing, Zhang Shi has already left for the Zhang clan together with my teacher. If you continue causing trouble around here, don't blame me for activating the sword formation. What the heck is wrong with you? I have already made everything clear to you. Why are you still going on a rampage over here? Previously, you claimed that as long as I were to meet someone I liked, you would give up and back away quietly. I should have already made it very clear to you that I like Zhang Shi. So why are you still causing such a huge commotion here? Even threatening to beat him up? Do you really think I dare not activate the formation on you? If you were to continue causing trouble here shamelessly, I don't mind teaching you a lesson. After receiving Zhang Xian's pointers, Shui Qianrou had become more highly regarded by Jian Qinsheng, such that she was even imparted with the method to control the formation inscribed into the residence. He has already left. I'll just have to chase him back then. Making a quick calculation, Luo Xianqing realized that it was indeed very likely that Zhang Xian had already left. Thus, he immediately flitted off in the direction of the Zhang clan without any hesitation. That madman, not expecting Luo Xianqing to come over in the middle of the night to cause such a huge uproar, only to leave before finishing his piece, Shui Qianrou was rendered speechless. She would have to be an utter fool to fall for a person that lacking in maturity. In the end, Zhang Shi was the only one who could really be thought of as perfect. Well, he would have been even more perfect if his words could have been any nicer, but again, geniuses tended to have extremely individualistic personalities. and she was perfectly fine with his personality, too oblivious to Shui Qianruo's fangirling. Luo Xianqing dashed straight for 3 days and 3 nights, till the last droplet of Jinqi within his body had been depleted. But even so, he was still unable to find any traces of Zhang Xian and the others. Before long, he was completely sapped of his strength, and had no choice but to come to a halt. And in the next instant, a mouthful of fresh blood spurted from his mouth. He had been too overwhelmed with rage earlier, that he was completely oblivious to his current physical state. But as soon as he came to a halt, he felt a feeling of weakness swiftly consuming his entire body, placing him on the verge of fainting. Even as a Saint 8 Dan expert, he was still incapable of maintaining flight at full speed for 3 days straight without any rest. Not to mention, the consecutive shocks he had sustained earlier had caused his Jinqi flow to descend into severe disarray. If not for the strong cultivation foundation that he had built up over the years, his cultivation could have very well gone berserk. From the looks of it, it seems like there's no way I'll be able to catch up with them anymore. Seated by the edge of a cliff, Luo Xianqing panted heavily as he thought with gritted teeth. Jian Qinxing and Zhang Xian had left on an aerial saint beast. As fast as he may be, if he couldn't see any traces of them after chasing them for so long, it didn't seem too plausible that he would be able to catch up with them anymore. But not only did that fellow dupe him, he even seduced his younger sister and his goddess. It would be hard to quell the burning rage within his heart if he couldn't at least give the other party a beating he would never forget. Should I contact my clan and have them liaise with the Zhang clan to deal with that fellow? A thought suddenly popped up in Luo Xuanqing's head. As long as he told his clan that the person whom his younger sister liked had gone to the Zhang clan, they would surely be able to make ample preparations to trap and eliminate that fellow. With the 2 most powerful sage clans moving in unison to deal with him, there was no way Zhang Xian would be able to get away. But somehow, the thought of Zhang Xian dying made the usually decisive him hesitate a little somehow. But the first elder has also instructed me to get close and avoid any conflicts with him. Furthermore, he's the direct disciple of Yang Shi too. Luo Xianqing was in a dilemma. It was imperative for him to accomplish the missions assigned to him by the clan, and the first elder did give him 2 clear missions. One was to get on close terms with Zhang Xian, and the other one was to kill the man his younger sister liked. But now that the 2 of them turned out to be the same person, was he to get close to him, or should he kill him? At the same time, he suddenly felt that it might have been a little too rash of him to conclude that Zhang Xian was the person whom his younger sister liked. While it was true that the latter was from the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy too, it could have just been a coincidence. All of these thoughts swarmed Luo Xuanqing's mind at once, leaving him feeling deeply lost all of a sudden. At this moment his eyebrows suddenly shot up. He flicked his wrist, and a communication jade token appeared in his palm. Tapping his finger on it lightly, there was a light, before an incomparably beautiful and seemingly flawless figure appeared before his sight. "Sis, aren't you grounded by the clan? How did you manage to contact me?" Luo Xianqing widened his eyes upon seeing the other party, and he asked in agitation. The person who was at the other end of the communication jade token was no other than his younger sister, the little princess of the Luo clan. "The clan might have grounded me, but sending out a message is nothing too difficult to me," the young lady replied. After assimilating the dimension silencer, her comprehension of space could be said to have reached a level comparable to their founder. If she wanted to, she could easily decipher the seal which the first elder and the others had set up without alerting them. "That's a relief. I happen to have something I need to verify with you." Heaving a sigh of relief, Luo Xianqing was just about to begin speaking when the young lady before him anxiously waved her hands and interjected. "Brother, I need you to hear me out first. Even back when we were still young, you have always been very doting of me, looking out for me at every corner, and secretly getting me what I want, and I am really grateful for that. There is one thing which I really need your help, and I hope that you can offer me your strength." Luo Xianqing could roughly fathom what his younger sister was about to say, but facing her pleading and desperate eyes, he hesitated for a brief moment before eventually nodding in agreement. As long as it's within my means, I'll do my best to help you. For his younger sister, he would even tread up a mountain of blades, or dive into a sea of flames for her, if he needed to. Hearing those words, relief visibly flickered across the young lady's face. As you know, I already have someone that I like. Our clan has already dispatched some men to the place where I have been to, and there's no doubt that they will attempt to kill him. I hope that you can protect him. Please don't allow any harm to come to him. You want me to protect him? Luo Xuanqing's eyes widened in astonishment. That's right. The young lady nodded. He's only an ordinary cultivator. He shouldn't lose his life just because I like him. This isn't fair for him. She turned her gaze toward Luo Xuanqing, and with an expectant and pleading look in her eyes, she said, Brother, you know that I have never pleaded anyone for anything, but just this once I'm pleading with you, please protect him. Luo Xuanqing's clenched fists trembled uncontrollably. He wanted to tell her that he had already promised the clan to kill that fellow, but in the end, he still held himself back at the very last moment. In the end, he still couldn't bear to see his younger sister unhappy. He took in several deep breaths before nodding in resignation. I'll protect him. I knew that you are the best. I'll be entrusting him to you then. A beautiful smile reminiscent of a flower bloomed on the young lady's lips. No matter what, please look after him and don't allow anyone to hurt him. I'll have to go now. Even though I'm able to send messages out, the others might notice that something is amiss if I do so too frequently, and that could cause unnecessary complications. As she said those words, the young lady's silhouette began to flicker, and it seemed as if her image would dissipate at any moment soon. Wait a moment. You told me to protect the person that you liked, but you haven't told me what his name is, and where he is at the moment. Even though he had a good idea whom the person was, he still wanted to verify it with his younger sister. His name's Zhang Xian, and he's currently in Qingyuan Empire. The young lady's voice drifted across with a tone filled with saudade and fondness, before gradually dissipating along with her silhouette. As I expected, hearing his younger sister's confirmation, Luo Xuanqing's face turned frighteningly livid. Zhang Xian. Even Luo Xuanqing himself was unable to clearly discern his current emotions, whether it rage or indignance that he was feeling. But these emotions swarmed relentlessly to his mind and to his heart, leaving him feeling as if he would explode from them. Achoo! Amidst the sky, Zhang Xian was seated on the back of a saint beast when he suddenly sneezed. Rubbing his nose, a confused look appeared on his face. Is someone thinking of me again? Being too outstanding sure is troublesome. Hi. He had been sneezing ever since he left the Sanctum of Sages. The person who was thinking of him sure was persistent. That's why I should maintain a low profile at all times. Otherwise, if Luo Ruoxin realizes that so many people like me, she won't be happy, Zhang Xian thought with a nod. And to be honest, he had indeed been much more low profile ever since he entered the Sanctum of Sages. The only time he had been high profile was when he challenged the Tower of Master Teachers. Otherwise, how could the cultivation technique forest, and even the entire inner sanctum still be intact? He had already been actively trying to play it cool. It sure is tiring maintaining a low profile, Zhang Xian thought as he rubbed his glabella. If not for his wish to maintain a low profile, he would have simply taken vicious upper body out. At the very least, he would not have just stopped with challenging a mere Tower of Master Teachers and breaking a couple of records. Do you know how difficult it was to suppress myself? However, this worked out fine as well. It was aligned with his humble personality anyway. Having spent a year as a cultivator, he understood the deep importance of maintaining a low profile. If he had gone around boasting about his strength and trump cards like his clone did, he probably would have already died. After a brief moment of thought, he flicked his wrist, whipped out a token, and began assessing it closely. It was the Sanctum Head token that he had received from Sage Kuei. The first layer of the seal on it had unraveled back when he received his 8-star Master Teacher emblem after clearing the Tower of Master Teachers. However, he had not had the time to examine it closely back then. Since he had some time on his hand now, it would be a good opportunity to study its changes. At this very moment, the Sanctum Head token was emanating a warm glow. Stroking it lightly with his hand, he could immediately feel a will surging into his consciousness. Even though his physical body remained motionless in the real world, he felt as if his consciousness was being dragged into a peculiar space. The next thing he knew, Sage Kuei was standing right before him with a faint smile on his lips. You sure became an 8-star master teacher fast. The rate at which you are growing has far surpassed my imagination. A hint of approval could be heard in Sage Kuei's voice. How far have you cultivated your divine eyes of the 9th netherworld to? Let me take a look. Regarding that, to be honest, I haven't started cultivating that optic art yet, Zhang Xian replied awkwardly. There were simply so many errors in that optic art that he could not bring himself to cultivate it. In fact, after he had obtained it, he could not even be bothered to give it a second glance. Hearing those words, Sage Kuei frowned. If you don't cultivate the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld, how are you going to remove the seals on the Sanctum Head token and be officially inaugurated as the new Sanctum Head? The most crucial requirement for becoming the real Sanctum Head was the cultivation of the Eye of Insight to the realm of Demon Vanquisher, and it was impossible to reach that level without cultivating the optic art. I do want to cultivate it, but the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld is a little. Never mind. Do you have any optic arts with you? If possible, I would like to borrow a couple of them for reference purposes. Fearing that Sage Kuei would be unable to take the trauma if he criticized the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld once more, Zhang Xian swiftly changed his words. The cultivation of the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld would only be a viable option to him after he successfully upgraded it into a Heaven's Path battle technique. After all, he had no intention of cultivating a battle technique, only to end up becoming color-blind, or even completely blind at that. Only my teacher, ancient sage Bo Shang, has the ability to create a battle technique as profound and abstract as optic art. There's no way you will be able to find another optic art out there, on the Master Teacher continent. Sage Kuei shook his head. May I know which part of the optic art you are confused about? Feel free to speak of it, and I'll slowly explain it to you. It's fine. I'll try deciphering it myself for now. Zhang Xian shook his head. It seemed like in terms of capabilities, Sage Kuei still came nowhere close to comparing to ancient sage Qiu Wu. The latter's fragmented souls were still capable of communicating with one another, whereas the Sage Kuei in front of him was clearly unaware of his conversation with the Sage Kuei in the Mountain Gate examination. It's fine. A displeased look materialized on Sage Kuei's face. What do you mean by that? In order to become the next Sanctum Head, you must cultivate the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld. I have spent many years cultivating that technique, and my insights will allow you to swiftly grasp the technique. Or perhaps, do you think that your understanding of the technique is even deeper than mine? Elder, that's not what I mean. To tell you the truth, there's a doubt that has been in my mind for a while that I would like to clarify with you. Knowing that Sage Kuei's time was probably limited, Zhang Xian did not want to waste time talking about the divine eyes of the 9th netherworld. At this point, he suddenly recalled what he had noted back at the inner sanctum, so he decided to make use of this opportunity to obtain some answers. Feel free to speak. Hearing that Zhang Xian had a question to ask him, Sage Kuei flicked his hand behind his back grandly and assumed the image of a powerful expert. If I'm not mistaken, there's a skeletal frame of an otherworldly demon emperor in a sculpture of yours in the inner sanctum. I'm curious to know how you managed to suppress its aura to the point where it's almost indiscernible. Zhang Xian revealed his doubts. He had been wondering about this matter ever since leaving the inner sanctum, but he was just unable to make sense of it. Since Sage Kuei's will had appeared before him once more, this would be a good opportunity for him to seek an answer to that. You know that there's a skeletal frame of an otherworldly demon emperor in my sculpture? Sage Kuei's eyes widened in astonishment. In an instant, the image of a powerful expert that he had just built up shattered, and disbelief could clearly be seen on his face. Indeed, if I'm not mistaken, the otherworldly demon emperor was an ancient figure in your era known as Vicious. Zhang Xian elaborated. Considering that Sage Kuei was Kong Shi's grand student, he should have heard of Vicious. You know of Vicious? Sage Kuei's cheeks began twitching. How did you manage to seal his upper body in your sculpture, without any hint of his aura leaking out? Zhang Xian asked once more. This? Sage Kuei was stunned. Hearing the affirmative tone behind the young man's voice, Sage Kuei hesitated for a brief moment before sighing deeply. Since you have already seen through this much, I guess there's no harm in telling you the truth. You're right. The skeletal frame that is sealed in that sculpture in the inner sanctum indeed belongs to Vicious. Many years ago, when I first found it, a will had already developed within it. In order to prevent its resurrection, I could only make use of Kong Shi's strength to suppress it. Kong Shi's strength? Yes. The inner sanctum is located in the very center of the formations of the 5 halls, and by using Kong Shi's personal handwriting and the fortune harnessed in this very land, I was able to suppress it thoroughly, to the point where it's rendered completely helpless to retaliate, Sage Kuei explained. Hearing that, Zhang Xian swiftly went through the relative position of the inner sanctum to the 5 halls. And indeed, the inner sanctum was located at the very center of their formations. That would explain why it was so rich in spiritual energy and the overwhelming academic aura that lingered there. Back then, when Vicious fought against Kong Shi, his strength had already reached a level surpassing all ancient sages on the master-teacher continent. At his peak, he was an entity whom none of us could match. In order to prevent his resurrection, I could only make use of all resources I had at my disposal to suppress him. Sage Kuei shook his head, after which, he turned a doubtful gaze to Zhang Xian and asked, the aura of the skeletal frame should have been suppressed to the point where it's completely indiscernible. How did you manage to notice it when your eye of insight is only at the 3rd realm? There had been several generations of sanctum heads prior to him, and their mastery of the eye of insight had far exceeded his. But even so, they had been unable to notice the presence of the skeletal frame. Yet, the young man before him had actually noticed that something was in the sculpture, and was even able to discern what it was clearly. How in the world did he manage to do it? I only managed to notice it by coincidence, Zhang Xian replied perfunctorily, not bothering to explain. Regardless of how you noticed it, listen to my advice and don't even try to touch it. Even Saint Nine Dan cultivators might not necessarily have the strength to stand against it. Seeing that Zhang Xian was unwilling to talk too much about the matter, Sage Kuei did not probe. Nevertheless, he still felt compelled to issue a warning. What if I have the confidence to tame the skeletal frame and prevent it from doing harm? Would it be fine if I take it out? Zhang Xian asked. Given that he possessed the Book of Heaven's Path, not to mention that Vicious' head was under his control, he was very certain that he would be able to take down Vicious' upper body too. However, he was just unsure if there was any way that he could retrieve the upper body without resulting in any adverse consequences for the inner sanctum. You want to tame Vicious' skeletal frame? Hearing those words, Sage Kuei was clearly startled for a moment before he shook his head. It's good that you intend to contribute to mankind, but I can tell you for certain that it's impossible. Even Kong Shi failed to do it back then. So do you think that you'll really be able to do it? It was no wonder why Sage Kuei didn't believe Zhang Xian was able to do it. If even Kong Shi was unable to accomplish that deed, there was little hope that anyone in the master-teacher continent would be able to do so. Just the fact that Vicious was able to trap Kong Shi back then was more than enough to show how powerful he was. Considering how Zhang Xian's cultivation was only at a mere Grand Dominion realm pinnacle, it wouldn't make any difference, no matter what kind of incredible means he had up his sleeves. You don't believe me? Noting Sage Kuei's expression, Zhang Xian chuckled lightly and said, "Follow me." After saying those words, he retracted his consciousness back to his physical body and went into his myriad anthive nest. Then he grabbed the token tightly once more. Boom! A massive head appeared within the myriad anthive nest. It floated quietly in midair, emanating a frightening aura. "Master," Vicious greeted. This. Sage Kuei's will flickered wildly, nearly dissipating on the spot. Having once suppressed Vicious, he could identify the latter's will and body with ease. Even though the massive head was a celestial designer artifact, The will and life within it was indubitably vicious. To think that the legendary vicious who had Kongsher trapped for 3 whole months in the ancient era would actually end up serving a young lad as his master. I have successfully tamed his heart, finger, and head, and I'm in the midst of collecting his other parts. Since his skeletal body with you, is there any way I can retrieve it safely? I think this would also be much safer in the long run as well. Zhang Xian said. Naturally, the best-case scenario was for him to retrieve the skeletal frame without causing the collapse of the inner sanctum. In the very depths of his heart, he didn't like causing destruction at all. Wherever it could be avoided, it should be avoided. Besides, once he became the sanctum head, the inner sanctum could be said to be under him as well, and destroying his own home base didn't seem like a very good idea. This can't be happening. Sage Kuei was still overwhelmed by the sheer shock of what he had seen, and his body flickered in and out of existence. He's already right before your eyes, and I believe you can tell for yourself whether he's really vicious or not. Seeing Sage Kuei's excessive reaction toward such a trivial matter, Zhang Xian couldn't help but shake his head in disapproval. How in the world can you be shocked at every single thing? Are you sure that you are really Kongsher's grand student somehow? It feels like you are a countryside bumpkin who hasn't seen the larger world outside yet. No matter how formidable Vicious was when he was alive, he had been divided into many pieces after his death, and every individual part wasn't particularly powerful. As such, it shouldn't come as much of a shock that he managed to tame them. It took some time before Sage Kuei finally recovered from his shock. With a bitter smile he said, "Since you are capable of taming him, I guess there should be no harm handing the skeletal frame over to you. However, the seal to decipher it is rather complicated, so it might be quite troublesome on your part. Please enlighten me." Hearing that there was a method to retrieve Vicious' upper body without causing any destruction, Zhang Xian hurriedly clasped his fist. "I sealed the skeletal frame, using a spatial secret art, so as to fuse it entirely with my sculpture. If you wish to separate the both of them, you must destroy it and—" In the midst of his words, Sage Kuei's will flickered once more, and before he could finish his words, he had already vanished from the spot with a light. Who? As if an extinguished candle flame. It seemed like the shock he had received had far exceeded his tolerance limit, causing him to dissipate on the spot. "You!" Zhang Xian was frenzied. Just what in the heck was wrong with these ancestors? How in the world could each of them be so unreliable? Kongsher disappeared in the midst of his words. Ancient sage Qiu Wu did so too. And now, even this fellow was doing it too. Was it some kind of tradition for them to do that? Or was this just a twisted sense of humor they had back in their era? Forget it. Even though Zhang Xian felt deeply stifled, he knew that there was no point for him to lose temper now, especially since Sage Kuei was already gone. Thus, he could only rub his glabella and turn his eyes back to the sanctum head token. After the removal of the first seal, it had visibly become more smooth and radiant, and ripples of powerful energy could be seen flowing on its surface, reflecting the massive might that it wielded. Is this a Saint Pinnacle artifact? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in excitement as he stroked its surface with his fingers lightly. He wasn't too sure just what tier the item was, but he was certain that it was far stronger than the Lingshu sword in his possession. If the two of them were to clash with one another, it was almost certain that the one to shatter would be his Lingshu sword. Just from that in itself, it could be seen that the token was definitely a Saint Pinnacle artifact at the very minimum. But perhaps it was due to the presence of the seal. Despite its high tier, there wasn't the slightest hint of spirit infused into the token. Its only unique property seemed to be its resilient exterior and its peculiarly sharp tip. Nevertheless, it could still display exceptional might when utilized in the right situation. Even a Saint 8 Dan cultivator could be easily cornered by the prowess of a Saint Pinnacle artifact. As long as he were to use it well, he might be able to slay even the Netherworld Azure Dragon beast. As expected of the personal artifact of the Sanctum Head, it was indeed no ordinary treasure. I wonder what kind of changes would happen to the token once I unseal the second layer of seal. The changes in the token after the unsealing of its first seal was already quite a huge surprise in itself, So Zhang Xian couldn't help but wonder what would happen once the second seal was unsealed too. While Zhang Xian was chatting with Sage Kuei and examining the Sanctum Head token closely, in the premier hall of the Sanctum of Sages, where generations of Sanctum Heads and Deputy Sanctum Heads resided, brilliant rays of light began bursting forth in close intervals, and the flurried chimes of a bell could be heard booming across the entire area. What's happening? Zhan Shi, Elder Gu, and the others hurriedly rushed over to the grand hall, as they exclaimed in astonishment. As a representation of the authority of the Sanctum of Sages, no one would ever dare to fool around here. Just what in the world could have happened to induce such a huge commotion? It's coming from the sculptures of the preceding Sanctum Heads, an elder exclaimed. Everyone hurriedly turned their sights over and saw the many sculptures of the many generations of Sanctum Heads shaking non-stop. The deafening bell chimes were echoing from them. The trembling of the sculptures should be a representation of their shock? But what could have happened to leave them in such a state? Elder Gu muttered in astonishment. Every single generation of Sanctum Head was a top-notch expert, possessing experience and eye of discernment that far surpassed any other cultivator in the master-teacher continent. It was unimaginable just what kind of major incident could have happened to have placed them in such a state. This was inconceivable. Could this mean the Sanctum Head token has surfaced? A thought suddenly came to Zhan Shi's mind, and he muttered softly with a pale face. The Sanctum Head token has surfaced? Do you mean that the Sanctum of Sages is about to usher in another true Sanctum Head? The many elders gathered in the area hurriedly turned their sights to Zhan Shi. Only a true Sanctum Head candidate would have the right to wield and control the Sanctum Head token. If that artifact had surfaced once more, it would spell that the real Sanctum Head was on the rise as well. That's right, that person should have received Sage Kuei's approval and successfully removed one of the seals on it. Otherwise, it shouldn't be possible for such a huge commotion to occur. Zhan Shi nodded, but in order to become the Sanctum Head, one must possess the eye of insight. Just who could that person be? The faces of the crowd reddened in agitation. Each time a real Sanctum Head appeared, the overall prowess of the Sanctum of Sages would surge forth, as if entering an era of swift development. It would be truly beneficial to them with a true Sanctum Head were to appear at this moment and lead them forward, especially during this era, which felt like the calm before the storm. The Sanctum Head candidate's identity won't be revealed until he fully awakens the Sanctum Head token. Zhan Shi said grimly. It was a tradition for the Sanctum Head candidate to conceal his identity until the inauguration ceremony. This served as a means to protect the Sanctum Head until he gained the strength to protect himself. Given the huge commotion that had occurred, it seemed like the Sanctum Head candidate had received the approval of the preceding Sanctum Heads, but the fact that he hadn't revealed his identity yet likely meant that he wasn't fully ready to succeed as the next Sanctum Head. Yet a moment later, Zhan Shi instructed, "Go and check who recently made a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan or successfully became an 8-star master teacher." As the Deputy Sanctum Head, he was still aware of the various conditions required to remove the seals on the Sanctum Head token. All right. One of the elders hurriedly backed out of the room, and soon, he returned with a look of disbelief on his face. Reporting to Zhan Shi, Yang Shi's student, Feng Zai has challenged the Tower of Master Teachers and cleared it. Feng Zai also successfully cleared the Tower of Master Teachers? A wave of silence swept across the crowd. Zhan Shi and the others were rendered speechless. In the several dozen millenniums since the creation of the Tower of Master Teachers, there had only been 3 people who had managed to clear the trial. Just what in the world had happened recently? There had been 2 consecutive challengers, and both of them had actually cleared it. How long did he take? One of the elders could not resist asking. Zhang Xian had used roughly 15 minutes, so how long did Feng Zai take to clear it? Almost an entire day. The elder who had gone out to investigate earlier replied. A day. His record might be beneath that of Zhang Shi, but it's definitely an outstanding achievement. Considering how the wills of the Sanctum Heads began reacting right after he became an 8-star master teacher. Could he possibly be the Sanctum Head candidate? Zhang Shi deduced. I think it's very likely. The other elders swiftly nodded in agreement. Even though Zhang Shi had cleared the Tower of Master Teachers very quickly, there was no peculiar phenomenon occurring right after he cleared it. On the other hand, just moments after Feng Zi became an 8-star Master Teacher, the wills of the Sanctum heads began trembling in shock. Could it be that he had received Sage Kuei's recognition and become the only current candidate to the position of the Sanctum head? But considering how Feng Zi is Yang Shi's direct disciple, it's only a matter of time before he returns to the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. Why would Sage Kuei choose him as a Sanctum head candidate? I have no idea either. However, Sage Kuei's wisdom is not something that the likes of us can fathom, and perhaps he might have seen something far beyond what we can see. To be honest, if a Sanctum head does appear in this generation, I would think that the likelihood of Zhang Shi being him is higher. According to the rumors I have heard, he's Feng Zi's senior, and on the whole, the capability and the potential that he has displayed far surpasses that of the other students. One of the requirements to becoming a Sanctum head candidate is the possession of the Eye of Insight. No matter how talented Zhang Shi may be, even if he's on par with the little princess of the Luo clan, as long as he doesn't possess the Eye of Insight, all would be for naught. That's true. Frowns emerged on the elders' faces as they heatedly discussed the issue with one another. Both Zhang Xian and Feng Zi were possible Sanctum head candidates. It was still impossible for them to confirm which of the two it would be, but most of them were leaning toward Feng Zi. I think there's at least a 90% chance that it's Feng Zi. Zhang Shi would likely be the one to succeed Yang Shi's position in the future, so there wouldn't be a problem for Feng Zi to take on the role of our Sanctum head. In the first place, the elders were all working on speculation, so even after a lengthy discussion, they were still unable to come to a conclusion. Eventually, Zhang Shi stepped forward and said, "All right, there's no point debating this anymore. We have narrowed the potential Sanctum head candidate to just 2 people, and that's good progress. For the time being, make sure that none of what we have discussed today gets leaked. Also, none of you are to show any disrespect to the 2 of them, and make sure to satisfy every one of their requests wherever possible." The elders nodded. Understood. The Zhang clan was located a far distance away from the Sanctum of Sages. Even when riding on Jian Qinsheng's tamed aerial beast, it would still take nearly an entire month to get there. With too much free time on his hands, after he was done examining the Sanctum head token, Zhang Xian began reinforcing his cultivation. It took him 3 days to fully reinforce his Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle cultivation, and after that, he spent a couple more days retempering his physical body and primordial spirit. Afterward, he suddenly found himself at a complete loss over what he should do. Eventually, he ended up spending most of his time discussing swordsmanship with Jian Qinsheng, and the latter benefited greatly from his unique and sharp insights regarding swordsmanship. With that leisurely atmosphere, 20 days passed in a flash. We should be reaching the Zhang clan in around 2 days' time. Studying the meandering mountain range and long rivers beneath them, Jian Qinsheng swiftly deduced their location, and he could not help but tremble in agitation. Just 2 more days, and he would be able to cleanse himself of the humiliation that he had suffered so far. He would be able to trample that haughty and boastful Xingming sword saint beneath his feet. Just the thought of it was sufficient to leave surges of exhilaration coursing through his body. If we barge in on the Zhang clan's clan assembly and challenge them on such a grand occasion, wouldn't it be in breach of the Master Teacher's value of propriety? Zhang Xian asked Jian Qinsheng. As much as he wanted to teach the Zhang clan a lesson, he was also well aware of his identity as a Master Teacher. He had to pay careful heed to his standing and act within the scope of what was deemed appropriate by society. To tell you the truth, I'm not the one who initiated this challenge. On the contrary, they were the ones who invited me over to challenge them. The Zhang clan's clan assembly is more than just an occasion for the members of the Zhang clan to gather and discuss major affairs. More than that, it's also used as a platform for the Zhang clan to reinforce their prestige and influence as the #1 sage clan in the Master Teacher continent. Jian Qinsheng harumphed coldly. The Zhang clan would usually send out invitations to others to attend their clan assembly. The motive was simple: to display the overwhelming might of the Zhang clan to the rest of the world. If it had been in the past, Jian Qinsheng would have surely become nothing more than a stepping stone to further the Zhang clan's reputation. But now that he had Zhang Xian, a one-of-kind genius who had successfully grasped two sword quintessences, on his side, no matter how powerful the younger generation cultivators of the Zhang clan were, who could possibly be a match for him? Do they send out invitations to all major powers? Zhang Xian asked doubtfully. I'm not too sure either, but that does seem to be the case. For every clan assembly that they've hosted so far, they invited many people from all walks of life to participate. There were demonic tunists, apothecaries, blacksmiths, beast tamers. Most occupation guilds received a couple of invitations, and they dispatched their most outstanding juniors to attend. While the pretext was to have them observe the clan assembly, in truth, it was to allow those of the younger generation to spar with one another and further their experiences. Even though Jian Qinsheng did not like the Zhang clan, he still could not help but remark. Even though it's clear that they were utilizing the clan assembly as a platform to boast of their prowess, they are indeed a force to be reckoned with. There are simply too few in the younger generation who are able to match their counterparts in the Zhang clan. Most occupation guilds received a couple of invitations. At this point, Zhang Xian could not help but recall what he had heard from Bai Hongyin back then. Back then, when the young prodigy was born, it seemed like they had invited quite a few renowned figures from the various occupations, and her teacher happened to be one of them. The previous Zhang clan's clan assembly happened 20 years ago, during the young prodigy's full-month celebration. Back then, the few students of mine were all defeated by a single person. Recalling the situation back then, a bitter look appeared on Jian Qinsheng's face. Just the direct disciple of the Xingming Sword Saint had been enough to render all of his students completely helpless, and that incident had truly shredded his dignity into many pieces. That matter had been on his mind throughout the years, bubbling furiously inside of him without any avenues to release it. If not for meeting Zhang Xian, there was a good chance that he would never have been able to exact vengeance in his entire lifetime. The young prodigy's full-month celebration. Speaking of which, since you attended the previous clan assembly, did you meet the young prodigy? Zhang Xian asked. Of course I did. Even though he was still very young then, there was an imposing air shrouding him, as if the essence of the heavens was infused right into him. Just a glance at him left me trembling at my core, feeling deeply ashamed of my form. Recalling that sight from 20 years ago, Jian Qinsheng could not help but fall into deep thought. Really, I just can't understand why the Xing Sword Saint would be blessed with such luck. Not only does he possess amazing aptitude in swordsmanship, he also sure has a way with giving birth. I can tell you that never in my life have I seen a child as talented as that boy. A child who's just barely a month old. Just what kind of talent could he possibly have? Isn't that a little too exaggerated? Zhang Xian's complexion did not look too good. If that child was really as outstanding as Jian Qinsheng made him out to be, his name would have resounded throughout the master-teacher continent by now. How could he not have appeared publicly even once? Exaggerated? Jian Qinsheng shook his head. It's no exaggeration at all. Oh, what I'm saying really comes from the bottom of my heart. If you don't trust me, let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of connate sainthood? Jian Qinsheng asked. Connate sainthood? Zhang Xian frowned, unsure of what that term was referring to. It refers to a person born intrinsically with saint realm cultivation, Jian Qinsheng said. Born with saint realm cultivation? How could that be? Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes in astonishment. It had taken him a great deal of effort in order to cultivate to sainthood. Just the fact that it had taken him more than 6 months to do so said a lot about the matter. And yet there actually existed individuals in the world who were born with saint realm cultivation? Surely not even the heavens would be so biased toward an individual? At the very least, there was not a person whom he knew who was a connate saint, and this included Luo Ruoxin as well. Indeed, I couldn't believe it the first time I saw it either, but the truth is as such, Jian Qinsheng remarked deeply. At this point, he could not help but recall something, and he remarked, "It might seem weird to say this, especially since the young prodigy was only a month old when I saw him, but I must say that there's really some degree of resemblance between you and him." There's some degree of resemblance between me and the young prodigy? Zhang Xian was startled for a moment before he shook his head bitterly. How could that be? He had already checked it with Zhang Jiuxiao's blood essence, and it had already been proven that he was not a member of the Zhang clan. Besides, if he really was the young prodigy of the Zhang clan, how could he have ended up as an orphan in the Tianxian kingdom without a single person looking for him at all? Furthermore, the fact that the young prodigy was a Khanate saint further disproved that hypothesis. Zhang Xian could still remember that he had only been at Fighter 3 Danjinshi realm when he first transcended to the Master-Teacher continent, so how could he possibly be the young prodigy? Well, the young prodigy might have been a person blessed by the heavens. But so what? He would make sure that anyone who dared vie with him for Luo Ruoxin would end up crawling around the floor, searching for his shattered teeth. I'm not saying that you are from the Zhang clan, just that the look in your eyes really resembles that of the young boy I saw back then. But of course, considering how long it has been since then, I think my memory could be failing me too. Jian Qinxing shook his head and chuckled softly. Considering the talent that the young prodigy harnessed, he would surely be put under the tightest guard of the Zhang clan and put through the strictest of education. There was no way that he would have been allowed to roam outside and become an itinerant cultivator. Unless the Zhang clan had their heads kicked by a donkey, there was no way that they would allow such a thing to happen. While Jian Qinxing was chatting with Zhang Xian on the back of the aerial Saint Beast, a figure was swiftly flitting toward the cloud-shrouded Zhang clan, and it did not take long for him to arrive at its doorstep. The figure handed a name scroll over and clasped his fist. Yang Shi's butler Hu Yue requests an audience with the head of the Zhang clan. It was none other than the man who competed with Sun Chong for the position of Yang Shi's butler, the left guardian of the Poison Hall, Hu Yue. In this instant, he looked completely exhausted, and even his aura seemed to be a little unstable. After leaving the Sanctum of Sages, he did not rush off to look for Yang Shi, but headed for the Zhang clan. Looking back, he had been flying for roughly an entire month now. Please give me a moment. Hearing that the visitor was Hu Yue, one of the guards hurriedly rushed in, and not too long later, he returned and ushered Hu Yue in. Elder, this way please. Yes. Hu Yue followed the guard into the courtyard, and after a few twists and turns, he finally arrived at a rather spacious room. In the room, a middle-aged man sat on the main seat, and there was a fatigued look on his face. Upon seeing Hu Yue, the middle-aged man stretched his hand forward and said, "Brother Hu, it has been long since we last met. Please take a seat." Paying respects to the Xing Sword Saint, not daring to carelessly take a seat even at the other party's invitation, Hu Yue respectfully clasped his fist and bowed down. He was a 9-star poison master who was capable of causing devastating damage with a wave of his hand. But before the middle-aged man, he dared not pull his weight. Putting aside swordsmanship, just in terms of fighting prowess, he was far from a match against the middle-aged man standing before him. There's no need to stand on ceremony. The middle-aged man waved his hand. I'm here to ask about my master's whereabouts. Half a year ago, when I parted with him, he said that he was heading for the Zhang clan. Hu Yue lifted his head and asked, "May I know if he's here at the moment?" Yang Shi is indeed here, but he's currently in seclusion. I'm afraid that this wouldn't be a good time to contact him, the middle-aged man replied. Seclusion. Hearing those words, a hint of anxiety flashed across Hu Yue's face. It seemed like he had something to say, but he had no idea how he should bring it up. What's wrong? Feel free to speak your mind. Seeing through Hu Yue's thoughts, the middle-aged man frowned. Hu Yue hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth with determination and revealing, "It's like this. Just a while ago, I found a talented young man who is in his early 20s, and while I'm not too sure about it, I seem to have vaguely sensed the presence of the innate fetal poison that I planted 20 years ago." The innate fetal poison that you have planted? Hearing those words, the middle-aged man immediately stood up from sheer agitation, and his body trembled nonstop. Seemingly unable to believe what he had just heard, he anxiously asked, "Are you certain about it? It has been years since I planted the poison, and it has been whittled down to the point that it's extremely weak. But still, I don't think I would make a mistake recognizing it." "I'm quite certain of it," Huiwei said with an affirmative nod. "What's his name, and where is he now?" the middle-aged man asked in agitation. His previous composure had vanished without a trace, and his voice had become a little hurried. "His name is Zhang Xian, and he's currently in the Sanctum of Sages," Huiwei said. "Zhang Xian? His name is a little off, but his surname is still Zhang." The middle-aged man frowned for a moment before a thought seemed to have suddenly struck him, and his eyes lit up in excitement and agitation. "It must be him. There's no doubt about it. It must be him. Quick, invite him over to the Zhang clan." Halfway through his instruction, the middle-aged man suddenly halted for a moment before shaking his head. "No, that would take too long. I'll head over there myself." As he said those words, he walked down from his seat, as he whipped out a communication jade token, and sent a message through it. Not too long later, a middle-aged lady flew over in a fluster. Even though age had left its marks on her, one could still vaguely see traces of the ravishing beauty that she had been in her youth from her face and figure. On top of that, she also carried a sharp disposition reminiscent of an unsheathed sword that would split one in two in an instant. "The Meng Sword Saint Wang Mingya. There's news on him? Is that true?" With reddened eyes, Meng Sword Saint questioned him, with a deeply apprehensive look, as if frightened to raise her expectations only to have everything come crashing down on her once more. The middle-aged man gestured to Huiwei and said, "Brother who said that he encountered a talented young man in his 20s in the Sanctum of Sages, and he sensed the innate fetal poison that he planted back then in him." The Meng Sword Saint anxiously turned her gaze toward Huiwei to seek confirmation. "Madam, I can swear on the heavens that my words are true." Huiwei bowed deeply to the Meng Sword Saint, before swiftly going through what he had said earlier once more. By the end of it, Meng Sword Saint's body was already shaking uncontrollably, and her eyes were glistened with tears. With a hoarse voice, she turned to her husband and said in agitation, "It must be him. It's definitely him. I'll be heading off to the Sanctum of Sages right now. Are you coming with me?" "Of course I'm coming as well," the middle-aged man exclaimed. "The clan conference is just about to begin. Aren't you afraid that your old ancestor will be angry if you, the clan head, aren't around?" The Meng Sword Saint harumphed. "We have given up so much for the clan that we should at least be entitled to this much selfishness. We have been searching for him for so many years, and this is the only time we have received concrete news on his whereabouts. If anyone stops me from making my way over, I swear that I'll slice him into shreds." The middle-aged man flung his hand backward furiously as a domineering aura flowed forth from him. The sword intent that poured out from him at that instant felt as if it would soar into the heavens and pierce through the boundless sky. "Indeed, we have already done enough for the clan. So many years have passed since then, and we still don't know whether he's living well or starving." At this point, Meng Sword Saint found herself unable to continue any further, and she lowered her head quietly. Droplets of tears dribbled down from her cheeks to the floor. Seeing this, the middle-aged man wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders and said, "Let's go." Then he waved his free hand. Boom! A furious roar sounded, and a saint beast swiftly appeared right before them. With a leap, the Xing Sword Saint and the Meng Sword Saint leaped onto its back. "Brother Hu, I hope that you can keep what you have just said confidential. Also, I hope that you can keep our whereabouts a secret as well." Standing on top of the aerial beast, the middle-aged man clasped his fist. "Xing Sword Saint, please rest assured, I won't speak a single word of this matter before others." Huiwei nodded. He knew that the unbelievably powerful couple standing before him would surely chase him to the end of the world, until he was finally escorted to his grave, should he reveal a single word about the matter. So without the slightest bit of hesitation, he accepted their requests. "You have my gratitude for that. If that person you spoke of is the person we have been searching for, the both of us will surely pay you a visit another day to thank you," the middle-aged man said. Also, you need not worry about Yang Shi. He's currently cultivating in the Zhang clan, and I can tell you for certain that his safety is guaranteed. You can stay here without worry. I have already informed him to look for you once he's out of his seclusion. Thank you, Xing Sword Saint. Huiwei clasped his fist. The middle-aged man nodded before tapping his feet lightly. Hula. The next instant, the Saint Beast immediately surged forth toward the skyline, heading in the direction of the Sanctum of Sages. Shortly into their flight, they saw a Saint Beast flying in the opposite direction as them. Recognizing the Saint Beast, the middle-aged man's eyebrows knitted together. It's Jian Qinsheng's Cloudlight Saint Beast. Jian Qinsheng, that obstinate fellow? Let's take a detour around him. If we bump into him, we will end up wasting a great deal of time. Right now, I only want to meet Zhang Xian. The Meng Sword Saint nodded in agreement. All right. Knowing that an encounter with Jian Qinsheng would probably dredge up all of their old grudges and stall them significantly, the middle-aged man tapped his feet lightly. The aerial Saint Beast that they were riding on immediately dived into the clouds, disappearing without a trace. In the portable room on the Cloudlight Saint Beast, a deep frown suddenly appeared on Jian Qinsheng's forehead. What's wrong? Zhang Xian asked. Under normal circumstances, no one would keep their spiritual perception active at all times, so he did not notice the Saint Beast ahead of them diving into the clouds. It seems like a rather powerful aerial Saint Beast that was in our path has flown away. Jian Qinsheng shook his head. It's fine. It's good that it didn't notice us, or else we would have been in deep trouble. As the head of the Zhang clan, the Xing Sword Saint had multiple Saint Beasts under his command, and the one that he was currently riding on happened to be one that Jian Qinsheng did not recognize. On top of that, they were quite some distance away from one another, so Jian Qinsheng was unable to accurately discern the people riding on the Saint Beast. There was, however, only one thing that Jian Qinsheng was certain of. The Saint Beast that had just moved out of their path possessed far greater strength than the Cloudlight Saint Beast that he was currently riding on. To wield greater strength, and yet simply turn around and leave, it was likely that the other party had not noticed them. Otherwise, they would have been in for a tough battle. Even though his cultivation had reached Saint Realm, and he could fly freely without fear of plummeting to the ground, it was still rather disadvantageous for them to fight against a powerful aerial Saint Beast in the skies. If it was possible to avoid a fight, it would be best to do so. That's fortunate. Having understood this, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Deciding not to pay too much heed to the Saint Beast that had been in their path earlier, Jian Qinsheng swiftly confirmed their location and said with a chuckle, "We're not too far away from the Zhang clan anymore. As long as we speed up a little, we should be able to arrive in half a day's time." Elder Jian, since we are going to compete with the Zhang clan in the field of swordsmanship, may I know what outstanding sword practitioners there are in Zhang clan, and what kind of sword quintessence they have comprehended? Zhang Xian asked. Know one's strength and one's opponent, and one would attain 100 victories in 100 wars. He did not think that there were any sword practitioners in the same cultivation realm who were capable of matching him, but it was still best to tread carefully. Otherwise, if he ended up being defeated by those small fries, what right would he have to challenge that young prodigy and vie for Luo Ruoxin's hand in marriage? He only had a single goal for this trip to the Zhang clan, establishing dominance. As such, nothing could go wrong. Even if that young prodigy appeared in the clan assembly, he would ensure that the other party learned of his prowess. Currently, in the younger generation of the Zhang clan, the person who possesses the deepest understanding of swordsmanship is Zhang Su. The Xingming Sword Saints once offered him pointers in his swordsmanship. Jian Qinsheng harumphed. He's also the fellow who came to my residence before, wanting to access my library, only to be chased away by me. Zhang Su. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before nodding. He had heard of the matter between Zhang Su and Jian Qinsheng from Shui Qianrou, and it was precisely due to that incident that led to him thinking that Jian Qinsheng had an eccentric temper. From the looks of it now, It was rather clear that it was not on a whim that Jian Qinxing chased Zhang Su away. Given the deep grudge between him and the head of the Zhang clan, it was only natural that he would not be too fond of the offspring of the Zhang clan. That's right. In total, sword quintessences can be divided into 5 main classifications. The old sword maestro's devastating offensive swordsmanship and ancestor Liu Shui's impregnable defensive swordsmanship correspond to strength and defense respectively. Other than that, there are also dexterity, speed, and void. Jian Qinxing explained grimly. Void. Hearing a foreign term, Zhang Xian could not help being confused. He could roughly comprehend what dexterity and speed entailed, but what would void be? To be honest, I don't have a clear grasp of what void is at the moment either. In the present day and age, it could be said to be somewhat like a legend among sword practitioners. Rumor has it that Kong Shi reached this level back then, and with just a casual swing of his blade, even if his swing wasn't fast, was lacking in strength, and was riddled with loopholes, his slash would still, by some inexplicable phenomenon, be able to overcome his opponent's move with ease. Jian Qinxing explained, only that which is truly non-existent can be considered as void. If my guess fails me not, in order to comprehend a void quintessence, one must fuse the other 4 quintessences together. However, just comprehending a single quintessence would already take a sword practitioner an entire life's worth of time and effort. To comprehend 4 at once. To be honest, other than Kong Shi, I don't think that there's anyone in this world who is capable of doing that. I see. Zhang Xian nodded. He had comprehended 2 sword quintessences, and in the field of swordsmanship, he was by no means weaker than Jian Qinxing. Even though the latter's description was very vague, he was still able to form a decent picture of what the latter was talking about. While sword quintessence was commonly known as the pinnacle of swordsmanship on the master-teacher continent, it did not mean that it was the end of the road for sword practitioners. Those who had achieved sword quintessence would only come to realize that there were limitations to the current path of swordsmanship that they were pursuing, and there was still a greater peak above them. Most likely, the void sword quintessence was a concept that would push one closer to that peak. The sword quintessence that the Zhang clan specializes in is speed. The swordsmanship that they execute pushes their speed to the extremes, to the point where the concept of time seemed to fall apart. It is due to this that the Zhang clan's swordsmanship is deeply feared on the master-teacher continent. Speed. Zhang Xian's face turned grim. The Zhang clan's unique bloodline was capable of controlling the flow of time. He had experienced that for himself, and without a doubt, it was an incredible ability. Most likely, the speed sword quintessence that they comprehended had something to do with their unique bloodline. As the saying goes of all martial arts in the world, there is no might that cannot be overcome. Only true speed stands undefeated. Speed would always be one of the crucial factors that determine the outcome of a battle. For example, as powerful as Zhang Xian's sea-severing sword was, it required lengthy preparation before it was ready for execution. If his opponent moved fast enough, it was possible to his opponent to interrupt him in the midst of his preparation. Indeed, the speed of their swordsmanship tears down the very boundaries of time, such that even the flowing water swordsmanship wouldn't be able to hold its grounds too long against it before being breached. On top of that, any attempts to launch a counterattack would only be rendered futile by their absolute speed. This is also the reason my students suffered a tragic loss the last time around. Jian Qinxing shook his head. Even though he knew where the foundation of the Zhang clan's swordsmanship lay, he simply was not able to find a sure-proof way to break it. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that it's impossible to achieve victory? Zhang Xian frowned. If even you are completely helpless against the Zhang clan's swordsmanship, even if I'm slightly stronger than you, it should be impossible for me to win against them too, right? It wouldn't be easy to achieve victory, but it's definitely not impossible. Other than the void sword quintessence, the remaining 4 types of sword quintessences are able to curb one another. By itself, it would be difficult for your strength sword quintessence to stand against the overwhelming speed of the Zhang clan. However, if it is used together with the flowing water swordsmanship as well, there is a good chance that you will be able to overcome their speed sword quintessence. Jian Qinsheng said. On the other hand, Zhang Xian frowned in confusion. It was just a moment ago that he felt that it would be difficult for him to achieve victory, because it would simply take too long for him to charge up sufficient momentum to launch the sea-severing sword. How would the flowing water swordsmanship make any difference? You are cornered by your own train of thought. Seeing how even the usually knowledgeable young man would have his moments of foolishness, Jian Qinsheng could not help but chuckle softly. By itself, the flowing water swordsmanship isn't sufficient to fend off the Zhang clan's swordsmanship for too long. But all you need is just to stall your opponent for several breaths. As long as you can gather sufficient strength during this period of time to launch the old sword maestro's ultimate technique, you should be able to subdue your opponent easily. The speed sword quintessence is formidable, but it isn't infallible. Before the might of your sword art, there's no doubt that you will be able to easily subdue your opponent. This, widening his eyes in realization, Zhang Xian could not help but burst into laughter. Indeed, he had been thinking of the two sword quintessences as separate entities, so he had failed to consider this point. As long as he could use the two sword quintessences with one another, their might could be brought up to a whole new level. The tight defense of the flowing water swordsmanship, and the crushing power of the old sword maestro's sword art. As long as he could buy sufficient time to launch the sea-severing sword, no matter how fast his opponent was able to move, the other party would still be rendered completely powerless under the relentless onslaught of sword qi. So, when fighting with those of the Zhang clan, you can use the flowing water swordsmanship to first protect yourself as you prepare for a counterattack with the sea-severing sword. As long as you time your blade well, even Zhang Su will struggle to match you. Jian Qinsheng said. Even though none of his students were able to deal with the sword practitioners of the Zhang clan, the young man before him had the ability to do so. As someone who had comprehended two different types of sword quintessences, the young man's mastery of swordsmanship was far above his. As long as the young man was able to complement his two sword quintessences with one another impeccably, he would be invincible among his peers. Even if the young man faced the Xingming sword saint at the same cultivation realm, Jian Qinsheng was confident that the young man would be able to eventually achieve victory. Unless the Xingming sword saint had managed to comprehend two sword quintessences as well, he would not stand a chance against the young man at all. However, I would also like to highlight that Zhang Su is only the strongest sword practitioner from the Zhang clan, who has enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages, so he might not necessarily be the best sword practitioner in the Zhang clan. Thus, you mustn't underestimate your opponents once we are there. At this point, Jian Qinsheng's expression suddenly turned grim. This is especially so for the young prodigy of the Zhang clan. So far, there's still no concrete news about him yet, and if I'm not mistaken, there's a good chance that he might appear in this clan conference. After all, this is a good opportunity for the Zhang clan to build up the reputation of the young prodigy ahead of the marriage with the Luo clan's little princess. Young prodigy? Indeed, the previous clan conference held by the Zhang clan was during the young prodigy's full month celebration, and it served as a declaration of strength to the rest of the world. In the 20 years since then, there has been absolutely no news about the young prodigy, so I suspect that this is an intentional ploy from the Zhang clan in order to build a powerful entrance for him. As long as the young prodigy is able to display overwhelming strength during this clan conference, the prestige of the Zhang clan will be brought to an entirely different level. Jian Qinsheng said. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. The other party was right. Considering the usual shameless shenanigans that the Zhang clan resorted to, this was indeed something that sounded like what they would do. Intentionally hiding the young prodigy from view, so as to create some controversy and confusion, only to bring him out at the crucial moment, so as to solidify their reputation once and for all. Khanate Saint. To be honest, it would be a lie if Zhang Xian said that he did not feel the slightest bit of stress at having to face the young prodigy of the Zhang clan. After all, Luo Ruoxin had been able to reach a realm far higher than the current him despite not being a Khanate saint. Considering the talent and resources that the young prodigy had at his disposal, just what kind of realm could he have reached by now? Noticing the unnatural look on Zhang Xian's face, Jian Qinxing attempted to console him. You don't have to worry too much about the young prodigy. It isn't much for you to lose to him. Not even Kong Shi was born as a Khanate saint. Even if you can't compete with him, no one will say anything about it. However, Jian Qinxing's consolation only served to make Zhang Xian's complexion even more awful. Losing to that fellow who was only good for bragging? Dream on. Elder Jian, do you happen to have any phantasmal space realm cultivation technique manuals? Zhang Xian asked grimly. He had already reinforced his Saint Six Dan Grand Dominion realm cultivation for more than 20 days. Since it was likely for the young prodigy to appear, he would really have to think of a way to make a breakthrough in preparation of a fight against the other party. Otherwise, he probably would not stand a chance at all. Phantasmal Space Realm Cultivation Technique Manuals? I only happen to have one of them, and it was left behind by my ancestor. Knowing that the young man had an interest in reading, Jian Qinxing was not surprised by the request at all. With a flick of his wrist, he took out a book and passed it over. Thank you. Zhang Xian took the book and collected it into the Library of Heaven's Path. It was indeed a Phantasmal Space Realm Cultivation Technique Manual, and it was of a particularly high tier. What was unique about this cultivation technique was that it harnessed sword intent, so it was probably a unique cultivation technique passed down in the other party's lineage. With a thought, Zhang Xian swiftly compiled the various Phantasmal Space Realm Cultivation Technique manuals that he had together. There's still a flaw in the Saint Seven Dan Heaven's Path Divine Art. Zhang Xian frowned. He had already gathered quite a few Phantasmal Space Realm Cultivation Technique manuals a while back and compiled them into a Heaven's Path Divine Art. But due to the limited number of books in his possession, there had still been several flaws with it. Perhaps due to the high tier of the cultivation technique manual from Jian Qinxing, it had managed to resolve most of the flaws, leaving just a single one behind. Just as Zhang Xian was about to take a closer look at the flaw and ponder on how it could be resolved, he suddenly heard Jian Qinxing's voice once more. Oh right, I almost forgot about it. You won't be challenging the Zhang clan under the identity as my student, but as my senior from the same lineage. Senior? Surprised by those words, Zhang Xian raised his head to look at Jian Qinxing. You were able to learn the flowing water swordsmanship just by studying the character on the wall. This is a feat that even I'm incapable of pulling off, so naturally, I am unqualified to have you treat me as your teacher. Since that's the case, it's much better to have you come as my senior instead. This way, it will be less likely for us to get exposed, Jian Qinxing said. Considering how his mastery of swordsmanship was not even close to matching up to the young man's, it would clearly be inappropriate to have the young man play the role of his student. Just the fact that the young man had learned the flowing water swordsmanship through comprehending the meant that the young man had inherited his ancestors' most direct heritage. From such a viewpoint, it was not exactly wrong for him to address the young man as his senior. Understanding Jian Qinxing's intentions, Zhang Xian nodded. To him, the identity that he used to enter the Zhang clan did not matter at all. As long as he could teach them a lesson, he would not mind anything at all. After explaining what needed to be explained, Jian Qinxing said, All right, I think you should rest for a moment. Things will get really hectic once we arrive at the Zhang clan. Zhang Xian nodded silently before closing his eyes to condition his state. Not too long later, his body suddenly jolted and soon after, he felt an immense pressure crushing down on him from the air. He hurriedly opened his eyes and soon, he heard a voice booming across the air. May I know which friend is approaching? Please report your name, so that we can register you. Through the windows, Zhang Xian could see several old men standing atop another aerial saint beast some distance away, and they were currently looking at them with clasped fists. It was difficult for him to gauge how powerful they were from where he stood, but he could sense that their power had locked down the surrounding space, making it impossible for them to barge past them. I am Jian Qinxing from the Sanctum of Sages. I have been invited here by the Xing Sword Saint, and here is my invitation letter. Jian Qinxing flicked his wrist and tossed a jade token over. One of the elders caught the jade token and examined it carefully before replying. Ah, so it's Sword Saint Jian. I'm deeply apologetic for our rudeness. This way, please. I'll be troubling you then. Nodding, Jian Qinxing prompted the saint beast beneath him to slowly continue moving forward. Zhang Xian took a look at the scenery ahead, and he soon noticed a massive city appearing on the horizon. This city was located against the mountains, which bestowed it with a majestic aura. There were many formations erected all over it, such that it would be nigh impossible for Saint Nine Dan, or even real 9-star master teachers to breach it. The base of the Zhang clan is also known as Dracatiger City. The formations cast over the city were personally set up by the ancestor of the Zhang clan, and the prowess they harness is unimaginable. Jian Qinxing explained through Jinqi telepathy. The group that we encountered earlier are the elders of the Zhang clan. Even though it might appear that they are welcoming their guests, the truth is that they are flaunting their strength to the rest of the world, so as to construct an inviolable image. Zhang Xian nodded. Through tapping into the prowess of the surrounding formations, the elders emanated an aura that felt as if they wielded absolute control within the area. Those whose mental resilience was slightly weaker might even have found themselves feeling deferential toward the Zhang clan, giving up all thoughts of resistance against them. And once this thought was born within one's mind, it would be hard to overlook it anymore. What huge airs they are putting up, to be flaunting their strength even to their guests. Really, where did they learn their manners? Zhang Xian harumphed coldly, as they glanced at the massive formations ahead of him. Proper etiquette dictated that a host should offer the most earnest welcome to their guests, but instead of doing so, the Zhang clan chose to put down their guests instead. This felt extremely distasteful to Zhang Xian. Very well. Since this is the game you want to play, let's see how far you can go. Staring at the formation intently, Zhang Xian willed in his mind flaws. Who? A book materialized in the library of Heaven's Path. Grade 9 Defensive Formation Dual Spirit Heaven Dominating Formation, set up by the old ancestor of the Zhang clan. The formation harnesses the might of both dragons and tigers, and for this reason, it's also known as the Dracatiger Formation. The might of the formation makes it difficult for Saint Nine Dan cultivators to overcome it. Flaws. Number 1. It requires a high input of spiritual energy in order to sustain the formation. Number 2. The heart of the formation is sustained by a dragon spirit and a tiger spirit. While this allows the formation to be more flexible to different situations, it also means that the formation will be swayed by the wills of the two spirits. Number 3. Information concerning the formation surged into Zhang Xian's mind. All in all, there were 17 flaws to the dual spirit heaven dominating formation. As a grade 9 formation, it had already developed its own spirit. As time went by, the spirit would gradually grow stronger and stronger, and it would instinctively remove or mitigate any perceived flaws that it noticed. As a result of that, even if one knew the flaws of the formation, it still would not be easy to exploit them. This formation can be considered one of the stronger ones even among grade 9 formations, Zhang Xian grimly remarked in his heart. The formation turned out to be far stronger than he had expected. While he had not seen the blueprint of any guard 9 formations yet, the might and transformations harnessed within the formation before him had already far surpassed his imagination. I'll have to study it carefully first. Just as Zhang Xian was about to take a closer look at the dual spirit heaven dominating formation, the elder who had spoken to them earlier suddenly flew over and clasped his fist. Esteemed guests, please hand over your storage rings. Please rest assured that we'll seal them right before you so as to ensure that we won't inspect or take anything from them, and we'll return them to you when you leave. You want us to hand over our storage rings? Zhang Xian frowned. Several of his secrets were concealed within his storage ring, and he brought it wherever he went. Yet, to have to hand it over just to enter the Zhang clan, was this not a little too domineering? The elder nodded. Indeed, this is a rule in the Zhang clan. If you wish to step across the Dracatiger formation, you'll have to hand over your storage rings. Don't worry, the Zhang clan has everything you need. You will be able to use our items easily once you familiarize yourself with them, so there's no need to worry. Noticing the awful look on Zhang Xian's face, Jian Qinsheng took out his storage ring and passed it over to the elder, as he explained the matter telepathically to him. This isn't a rule imposed just by the Zhang clan. Most major blessed lands have such restrictions as well. Outsiders are expected to take off their storage ring, and in more extreme cases, they might be prohibited from bringing their weapons along. He had been to the Zhang clan before, so he was well aware of the rules. Many other major organizations, such as the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, enforce similar rules too. Firstly, it was a symbol of respect to the host. Secondly, it was to avoid possible menace from getting into the base. Many years ago, there had been a master teacher who had been blackmailed by the otherworldly demonic tribe to bring a storage ring filled with a massive army of otherworldly demons into one of the strongholds of humanity. That incident had resulted in huge losses for that stronghold, and they had almost completely been wiped out. Considering that the Zhang clan was the #1 sage clan of the Master Teacher continent, they were definitely one of the major targets that the otherworldly demonic tribe would want to bring down. Even if they were confident in their strength, it would still be best for them to maintain a high level of wariness. Watching as the elder took the ring from Jian Qinsheng and sealed it without peeking into what was inside, Zhang Xian asked with a frown, "What if I refuse to hand over my storage rings?" Stored in his ring was Vicious Head, the Qiuwu Palace, and many other secrets. He could not afford to let any one of these secrets get exposed. Even though the elder had said that he would only seal the storage ring, there was still a good chance that something might go wrong should he leave the storage ring with the other party. Furthermore, considering that the purpose of his visit was to challenge the Zhang clan, there was no guarantee that the latter would not attempt to peek into his storage ring after a falling out, and that could place him in grave danger. As unlikely as those scenarios were, Zhang Xian still felt that the Zhang clan was too shameless to be trusted. It's fine if you don't want to leave behind your storage ring. As long as you can clear our formation trial, you'll be permitted to bring your possessions into the Zhang clan. The elder replied nonchalantly, not showing the slightest hint of anger at Zhang Xian's rude question. It appeared that there were quite a few guests before him who had refused to leave behind their storage rings too, and the elder was accustomed to dealing with such problems. Formation trial? Zhang Xian asked doubtfully. The Zhang clan has a defensive formation, which is able to detect and fend off both cultivators and spatial artifacts. If anyone attempts to barge through the formation with a storage ring in possession, they will find themselves completely suppressed by the formation, even if they are a Saint Nine Dan cultivator. Formation trial simply means walking through the formation with a spatial artifact in your possession, Jian Qinsheng said. While he was speaking, another group of cultivators, who were unwilling to hand over their storage rings just like Zhang Xian, began making their way toward the defensive formation. Recognizing the other party's identity, Jian Qinsheng said in a hushed voice, "That's an elder from the Empire Alliance. He wields strength that's on par with me." Hula! The instant the elder stepped into the formation, his surroundings immediately burst into flames. A golden crimson dragon of flames dived down from the heavens, and its sharp talons tore through the air, crushing the space around the elder so tight that it robbed his ability to breathe. Shocked by the destructive might wielded by the formation, panic visibly appeared on the elder's face. He hurriedly flicked his wrist to draw a sword before swinging it desperately, sending a furious torrent of sword chi forward. Despite the elder's lack of composure, the strength that he wielded was remarkable. Not even the mighty netherworld azure dragon beast would not dare face him straight on. Even so, the strength that he commanded was trifling before the massive flame dragon. In just 2 clashes, he was already struck in the head and plummeted straight down from the sky charred. At the same time, under the raging assault of the flames, the storage ring that he wore also exploded, and the possessions that he had stored within it fell and scattered all over the ground. Due to the lingering heat and shockwave from the clash with the flame dragon, quite a number of them ended up sustaining severe damage. After which, the flame dragon dissipated into nothingness, and the formation reverted to its original form. One of the Zhang clan elders walked over to the Empire Alliance elder with an impassive look on his face. Now that you don't have a storage ring anymore, feel free to enter. The Empire Alliance elder meditated for a moment to recover from the injuries that he had sustained before walking into the Zhang clan, with an awful look on his face. And as expected, the formation didn't launch any attacks toward him anymore. Jian Qingqing's face paled upon seeing that sight, and he quickly turned to Zhang Xian. Zhang Shi, you should hand your storage ring over. They will definitely prepare a suitable sword for you later on, so you don't have to worry about not having a suitable weapon for the fight. An elder whose strength was on the same level as him did not even manage to survive 2 blows in the formation before being knocked out. Even if the young man before him was a prodigious swordmaster, his cultivation was simply far too lacking. He would surely be ravaged should he challenge the formation. The elder shot an impassive glance at Zhang Xian and said, "Hand over your storage ring or attempt to barge through the formation. The choice is up to you. However, I would just like to say that the Zhang clan won't be responsible for the consequences." He believed that the young man would know what was best for him, especially after witnessing what had happened to the Saint 8 Dan elder from the Empire Alliance. The Zhang clan won't be responsible for the consequences? Zhang Xian raised his head and asked earnestly, "Are you certain?" The elder frowned upon hearing such a bizarre question, unsure of what the young man was getting at. Nevertheless, he still nodded. "I'm sure. Are you qualified to speak on the behalf of the entire Zhang clan?" Zhang Xian continued asking. Cough cough Zhang Shi. The elder over there is the 3rd elder of the Zhang clan, Zhang Wuchen. Horrified, Jian Qingqing hurriedly explained to Zhang Xian. Given his position, he's definitely more than qualified to speak on the behalf of the entire Zhang clan. The 3rd elder of the Zhang clan? His words should carry some weight then. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before nodding slowly. A smile crept on his lips as he turned to the Zhang Wuchen and said, "I have made up my mind. Since you have said that the Zhang clan won't be responsible for the consequences, I shall challenge the formation trial." In the Zhang clan, the ranking of the elders was decided by their strength, and the seniority of their positions was proportionate to the authority that they wielded. Considering that the elder before him was the 3rd elder of the Zhang clan, he certainly had the authority to speak on behalf of the entire clan. "You are going to challenge the formation trial?" Jian Qingqing's face paled. With a deeply anxious look on his face, he urged, "Zhang Shi, you mustn't. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."